Everyone to please stand for a moment of quiet contemplation. Please be seated.
Tim Fisher's family at his passing, a true gentleman, the leader of the National Party. I don't think there'd be one person in this country that would say that they did not feel a twinge of sadness with his passing. And would this council resolve to send his family our condolences?
Thank you very much, Councillor Passis. Councillor Passis has moved a motion of condolence for the late Tim Fisher, former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. I'm very happy to second that motion.
Thank you.
I know, speaking for all people on the Labor side of politics, that Tim Fisher was a very highly regarded politician, a person of great decency and honesty and humility. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to that? If not, I will put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. We now need to deal with the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of August. Is there anyone who wishes to clarify or correct those minutes? Councillor York? Okay. If not, Councillor Steer will move their adoption, seconded by Councillor De Cruz. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. That brings us to the section of the meeting that is the public forum. Now, we have lots of people in the gallery tonight. We have one particular item for which we have a lot of registered speakers. And I just want to talk through what I'm proposing as a process for hearing from those people. That item is item 1, Tree Management DCP. Please raise your hand if you're in attendance for that item. Okay, I suspect the other item for which there's a number of people is Warren Road. Is that correct? Okay, that's most people. We have for the Tree DCP 7 registered speakers against, and normally under our Code of Meeting Practice we limit the number of speakers for and against an item to 3. In this instance, this is a very complicated policy matter, and I suspect that of the 7 registered speakers that we have against, there might be 7 different issues or 7 different amendments that you'd like to propose. And so I'm going to move that we hear from all registered speakers for that item, but I am going to ask for your cooperation. If someone before you, and we'll deal with it in sequential order, in the order in which people registered, if someone before you raises and speaks to the issue that you are here to raise, there's no need to get up and speak to it twice. So if that occurs, I'd like you either to get up and speak to the other issue that you'd like to raise, or to refrain from speaking. And that's, so I'm trying to create a bit of leeway here for all parties and to make sure that we do actually deal with the item that you're in attendance for tonight. So I'll move that we hear from all registered speakers for item 1, seconded by Councillor Passis. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The first registered speaker is Michelle Gardner of Summerhill. Michelle, are you here? There you go, that shortened things up. If someone notices Michelle come in subsequently, come and let me know. The second registered speaker is Rennie Holmes of Ashfield. For the benefit of all of our speakers tonight, our Code of Meeting Practice allows for 3 minutes for registered speakers to speak to an item. After 2.5 minutes, you'll hear a warning bell, which sounds like this. Thank you, Catherine. That's an indication that it's time to wrap up, and I will try to keep you strictly to time so that we can get on with the business of the meeting. Rennie, over to you.
First, I'd like to thank Julie Passis, Vicky Rossetti and Vic Macri for bringing this to Council in February last year, and to all the councillors that have worked on this to make this happen. It's a starting point, but we feel it doesn't go far enough to make the policy workable for all residents. Firstly, there have been 4 deaths over the last month from falling trees. And before you say they were in Melbourne, it's only through good luck and not through good management that it hasn't happened here. Over the years, I've had 2 trees come down on my property. You'll see the photos there. One tree fell on our home 16 days after being told by an arborist that it was safe. The second tree fell on our home after a gust of wind collected the canopy. This photo was taken, the other photo with the black and white at the front, was taken in 1960s, and you'll see that there's a palm tree in front of the flats. I was told, or my mother and I were told, by an arborist from the council that the tree, there was a palm tree there. Trees do not change their genus or species overnight. If you look at the second photo attached to that, there's a pine tree there. We're told by the council arborist that this tree was 75 to 100 years old, or even could have been there from the original land grant. My mother planted that about 40 years ago in circa 1975. We were told that we had to keep it because it provided amenity to the area and because it's the only tree in the whole street. I want to talk about the principles as was stated in the Your Say. First one, public safety. Public safety is a must. Most trees, on my mother's property and on my property, we have trees, lots of trees. We value them, we care for them, but when they've reached their use-by date, they have to go, when they're causing damage or they're going to hurt someone. Public safety should be number one. Protection of property. This is also important, but it's not always considered. Trees on private land, it says here, should be managed to ensure protection of property. This isn't stated in the DCP. I want to know who's eligible for the grants and who's going to oversee the grant application. We need an increased canopy, but in the inner west, it's unrealistic. The blocks are too small, the houses are too densely together, and we need to look at the targets again. Heritage. Trees do not discriminate. They do not know if you're near a heritage item in HCA.
Rennie, your time has expired.
I'm nearly finished. Next to a house, to an ordinary house. All property should have the same requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next registered speaker is Jeff Crossley of Tempe. You're welcome.
The draft DCP stated, as Rennie said, to be based on 4 principles: public safety, protection of property, equity and financial burden, and increased urban canopy. Look, but in many instances, I think the first 3 are ignored, and it really falls back. You can see that all it wants to do is increase urban canopy. And one easy example in the draft DCP is the dropping of dead wood from a tree is not considered to be a criterion council will consider when assessing a tree for pruning or removal. Now, that defies logic. How can this fit in with the principle of public safety, protection of property, or even financial burden? You'd think that even above and beyond the rare event of a tree falling over completely, the most danger to safety and property damage is bits of wood falling out of a tree on you. And this event isn't even rated to be an assessment criteria for council when you put in an application to prune or remove a tree. And please add that in. Another example of the erroneous wading away from the draft stated principles is the proposed treatment of the weed at the moment. And I understand camphor laurel's got a big mention. And I did a bit of research on them the other day. And look, thanks for including this an expanded weed list in. We'll get rid of a lot of exotic pests with it. But miraculously, under this draft DCP, once a weed, like a camphor laurel, reaches 10 metres in height, it's no longer a weed. And that's against state policy. The New South Wales Primary Industry, which compiled this weed list, notes that camphor laurels are mildly toxic to human, very toxic to native insects, very invasive, easily spread, actively exclude our native plants by making the ground beneath them barren, you can't have regrowth, and camphor laurels also shed large amounts of woody apicormic growth annually, with mature trees regularly shedding wood large enough to cause injury and fatality. The shallow root systems are a known trip hazard in the urban environment. And further, the New South Wales Department of Primary Industry advises landowners to eradicate all camphor laurels. And yet we've got these undesirable trees, and once they get to a really undesirable size, council calls them desirable trees. And look, remove this height restriction that's in that extended weed list. The measurement of the proximity of trees as proposed to the principal building is just mathematically wrong. At a glance, you probably figure out that there's something wrong with it, but basically you can remove a tree if it's less than 5 metres in height, its trunk diameter at ground level is 300 millimetres or less. And I better stop there, but I'm sure somebody else will pick up on that.
Very well spoken.
Okay.
Can I say, as well as being very articulate and erudite and having great timing, that was a really good contribution. So thank you very much for that. A model for everybody else. You should run for council. Our next registered speaker is John Candace of Stanmore. John, are you here? No? We'll keep moving. Next registered speaker is Michael Curran of Marrickville. Michael. Okay, no problem. Next we have, thank you very much for your cooperation, that's very helpful, Robert Mayer of Stanmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. My wife and I are local residents who have enjoyed living in the Inner West for a quarter of a century. There are many things we like about the Inner West, including the character of our streets and how green it is. We appreciate Council's efforts to create a single policy across the LGA. However, I'm here today because we are concerned about the implications of the proposed tree management DCP. We would like to express our concern about one particular point. There are many, but I'll focus on one of this revised draft, which we do not feel matches the express spirit of simplifying the policy and, in fact, can cause headaches and extra expense to both Council and ratepayers. Our concern is about clause 2.20.4, exempt trees and works. Under item C2, letter I, there is a list of trees that can be pruned and removed that do not require consent from Council. This is the same list that exists in the current Marrickville DCP 2011 under clause 20.2.3, item C2, letter I. However, in the draft version 2, clause 2.20.4, item C3, states that the exemptions do not apply to, number 9, any tree that is a heritage item, forms part of a heritage item, or is located within the curtilage of a heritage item identified in Schedule 5 of the various LEPs. One can understand the exclusion if the heritage item is a tree itself. But why would homes that are heritage items be excluded from the exemption that is available to every other house? The previous Marrickville DCP 2011 did not have such a restriction for heritage items related to this particular list of trees. We appreciate that the Inner West Council has a key role to play in helping ratepayers and in particular owners of heritage listed items to preserve their homes. One way of helping is with simple and fair rules, not additional red tape. We therefore request that you please consider making a small change to this draft version 2 so that clause 2.20.4, exempt trees and works, item C3, 9, only state any tree that is a heritage item, full stop. That's all. Thank you very much.
Excellent quality of speakers so far tonight. Our next registered speaker is Tula Chrysafis. Sorry about that, Ms. Chrysafis, of Summer Hill.
Yes. Good evening. I'd like to thank Councillors Passis, Macri and Rossetti for raising this very important motion. Only recently, Council held a Free Trees on Us Day to celebrate National Tree Day. Free Trees on Us. Wasn't it paid by ratepayers? Anyway, Mr. Griffiths stated online in part, I assume this is Gwilym Griffiths, your urban forest manager. These aren't shrubs, they're mature established trees and they'll make an instant impact to our residents' backyards. No kidding. One of the free trees was a Sydney gum tree, which I discovered can grow between 10 to 30 metres high and an average of 10 metres wide. Does this sound like an appropriate tree planting you claim to promote? Because I live in a heritage conservation area, I can't add another bedroom or bathroom to our little semi, but this living, growing, ever-changing tree you're giving away will average 5 stories in height and would span across 3 properties in my street. I wouldn't need a DA to plant it. No neighbour notification, no shadow diagram, no heritage impact statement, no heritage study. But I would need a DA and pay possibly thousands of dollars to remove it. And only with your consent. And then I must replant another tree that will mature to a similar size and scale. Does this seem balanced to you? One might say this is the definition of insanity. We've had to coexist for decades with a neighbour's full-grown leaning gum hovering over our property, and we've contended with block gutters, mould from our tree debris in the roof cavity, falling branches from this gum have broken our clothesline, pierced through our awning, damaged our sheds, overshadows practically our whole yard, and very little natural light to enjoy our garden. And because of this one tree, I won't let my young children play outside unless there's an adult present, but even then that means nothing if another large branch comes down without warning on my kids, family or visitors. To be clear, we have a wonderful relationship with our neighbour where this gum is, and our neighbour has always tried to keep on top of tree maintenance at his expense. Nevertheless, you don't need to be a level whatever arborist or structural engineer to know when this gum tree falls, and it's only a matter of time before it does, it will probably take out 3 houses before it hits the ground. All trees have an expiry date. Everything has an expiry date. I don't need council to tell me about what they call the perpetual protection of the urban forest. Let's get something straight. This is Sydney's inner west, not the Amazon. We don't live in tree houses. We're about 10 k's from Australia's largest city. Take a common sense approach to trees, people. Common sense. And look after your own trees before you tell people where and what to plant their trees.
Thank you, Tula. Our next speaker is Brigitta Molnar of Ashfield.
Can you pass that on? So they have an idea what I'm talking about. That is a very original letter from this council advising people how to plant trees. 3 meters from there. Pass it on.
Okay, we've got Mr. Kennedy there who can circulate the documents. Thank you, Ms. Molnar.
I have written to you, Mr. Darcy, with a letter on the 23rd of April, where I'm stating everything that is my problem. What I would like this council to do is make a law where trees should not be planted closer than 3 meters from a house. Because the ones that have been planted close to my house are not even a foot away. And they're interfering, showing the photos what they're doing. Now, it is very simple to resolve this problem. Make a plan where people will be planting trees 2 to 3 meters away from a building, where it can't damage the building. And anyway, people should know about the Australian standard, which explain things very, very well about planting trees close to where they can do damage. By all means, plant trees anywhere else where they are not doing any damage, especially to property. I am 60 years right prior to this council, older than many people here. And if I have to complain about something that I worked for 40 years and it's gonna damage my house, I have to speak up, even that it is with a very big accent. I am not easy for me to be here today. I'm 84 years old, and if I'm speaking up, please make it a rule, make it a law by this council that all the managing agents are going to be notified 3 meters from dangerous places. That's all I'm asking. Please be so kind and consider making that law. 3 meters from a house or from what you say in your letter of 26 years ago, telephone lines and sewages and electric lines, but most important, I'm worried about houses.
Thank you very much, Ms. Molnar.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
84 years old, still participating in our democracy. That's exactly what we like to see. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you very much, but I had a little bit encouragement of a very nice lady that is called Mrs. Passas. And I much mentioned that I had a very nice gentleman coming to my house to inspect my problem. His name is Orlando.
Okay, thank you for the
He's
encore.
very nice.
Thank you for that.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Anyone else who's been encouraged to attend by Councillor Passis, don't tell us at the end. Our next speaker is Nancy Walquist of Balmain.
Yes, I'm a trained bush regenerator and I'm personally responsible for planting 40 years ago many of the trees that are now a threat to life and limb and to property. I love trees, but this is just ridiculous that the policy that I've encountered dealing with council officers, that trees come before people. This current DCP is making some good amendments, but not enough. There's not enough consideration given to the safety of people and also to damage to property. The distance, one of the main issues is the distance between houses and trees in the proposed DCP is a mere 50 centimetres. This is absolutely ridiculous. Anything less than 3 metres close to a house, I mean, even then you're pretty crazy. I love the point that you should need a bloody DA to plant a tree that's going to grow to 30 metres. And the other point is that the additional weed trees, bush regenerators like me have been getting rid of them for decades, and I can assure you when they reach 10 metres, they do not change their stripes. They are still weeds. Thank you.
And our last registered speaker tonight for this item is Jeff Clulow of Balmain.
Not here.
Not in attendance. Has Michelle turned up? Michelle Gardner? No, that concludes the speakers for this item. They were very good contributions. Thank you. The next item for which we have a registered speaker is item 3, approval for alcohol-free zones, Balmain, New Year's Eve 2019, and that speaker is Carmel Livingston of Petersham. Carmel, are you here? No. Okay. The next item for which we have registered speakers is the Local Traffic Committee. The minutes of the Local Traffic Committee. Now we have 3 speakers for the recommendation on Warren Road and 2 speakers against the recommendation on Warren Road. So the first speaker in support of the recommendation is Yvette Beaumont of Marrickville.
Hello, Warren Road. It's not easy getting locals together to campaign for change, is it? We've all got jobs and families, children to care for, businesses to run. It's easy to send emails, post on Facebook, but to organise people you don't otherwise know, to physically get together and turn up to meetings after work and so on, it's not easy. We've had community meetings, attended council chambers previously. 3 of us spoke. We visited the traffic team at their office, knocked on doors, spoke to local businesses, and here we are again, once more working for change to Warren Road. Our collective hard work proves how real the problem is and how committed we are to making Warren Road one way. East or westbound, as residents, we're very open to whatever the experts believe is best. For the councillors not au fait with the area, the Warren area, it's essentially like this. Warren Road is 4 metres narrower than neighbouring streets, and yet it takes all of the tonnage load. It is also the only road that allows unrestricted vehicle flow almost from Tempe, almost to Dulwich Hill. Much wider parallel roads offer the same opportunities for tonnage and access between suburbs. However, these wider roads have totally unexplainable restrictions on them, including an unexplained traffic island that blocks flow. There's already a pedestrian island to allow safe crossing 5 metres away. We've all asked ourselves why. Why these very odd restrictions for years and years and years? And it makes no sense, but we've put up with it. Some might say that they could name multiple streets that are similar to Warren Road within the Inner West Council. Well, I politely suggest that no, you cannot. How many Inner West streets do you know that have new and existing apartments that surrounding streets do not? The very real prospect of a substantial Mervat development at the bottom of the street, a Woolies loading dock. How many Inner West streets do you know that are 4 metres narrower than the surrounding streets, yet take all of the tonnage load and the bulk of the flow through traffic? How many have had multiple cars flip onto their roofs, drivers cut out of vehicles, written off cars, written off insurance replacement vehicles, stuck emergency vehicles, and, very sadly, a pedestrian fatality in 2009 in the very same place another vehicle flipped onto its roof in 2017. I doubt you can name any other street that ticks that many boxes. Another flipped vehicle earlier this year really was the last straw. We appreciate other streets will be concerned with any impact to their wider apartment-free streets, but clearly decisions have been made in the past that need to be reconsidered. Councillors, you voted unanimously to investigate this last time we all turned up. The Traffic Committee voted unanimously in favour of, in principle, one way. Sergeant Paul Vlahos, the traffic manager at Marrickville Police, favours one way, and 72% of council official survey respondents voted one way. I hope this somewhat explains some of the human impact on our street, the things that traffic counters and surveys cannot convey. It's time to share the load and share it in a way that's fair for our growing community.
Thank you. Tell you what, the quality of the speakers tonight has been very good. That timing was bang on. Next, please. Next speaker is Jason Brewer of Marrickville.
I actually thought I was doing after Alex. So I'll be very quick.
Well, can I ask you to just go over to Mr. Kennedy, who is here for that precise purpose, so that we can hear from you?
Jason's never received applause before. Here you go. You'd have to pay me to do that, Con. Thank you for letting us all speak. I would just like you to have a look at these pictures just to reiterate what Yvette has said, what we said 6 months ago, what we said earlier in this month. Warren Road has become a complete disaster in the 11 and a half years that I've lived there. It gets worse and worse. Can I just show you this front page? If you look, this is a Google map. It shows Warren Road as twice the width of any other neighbouring street when we have streets like Premier, Carey, Renwick and Grove that are literally double. If I can also draw you to the attention of page 2, we have 8:42 a.m. Warren Road completely gridlocked, Renwick Street 3 minutes later completely free and clear, and that is the same for Carey and Premier at that time of the morning. Can I also bring your attention to page 3 with a quote from our very own MP Joe Halen, and this is in response to the environmental impact statement regarding the Sydney Metro. She says, it also appears that Warren Road has been identified as a haulage route which is entirely inappropriate, etc., etc. Now that haulage route is also going to be the only access point for Mirvac, which is not going away, even though we were told it was. There's definitely no way that Mirvac are going to go away. So the Carrington Road precinct, which has potentially 2,600 units, and there's been an estimation of 230 concrete trucks every day, regardless of which way Warren Road ends up going, if it is indeed made one way, we're still going to suffer all of those haulage routes, irrespective of whether it's the metro that's being built or Mirvac. If you can look at page 3, you'll see a smashed up car, another one that's rolled over. We've got blocked emergency vehicles, and as Yvette said, we've had a fatality on our street. And if you look at the very last page, this was a still taken from a video that I actually took of a Woolworths truck coming eastbound into Warren Road and doing a perfectly easy U-turn straight into the Woolworths dock, and that is with a truck on the other side of the road. So it is totally feasible to have this street going from west to east, which would then have far less impact on any of the neighbouring streets. Thank you.
All right, lost my head there. Not for the first time. Our next speaker is Alex Dilworth of Marrickville.
Good evening. Basically, I didn't realise we should have timed this a bit better, but I'll try and put it together. We've got one of our residents off Warren Road. He's in his 80s. He's here tonight. He was trying to get this one way 10 years ago, and he's had his car damaged. His wife's had his car damaged, and he's seen it all, the accidents, etc., the swearing and everything else. We all agree that the streets in the inner west as well are congested and narrow, but these facts prove that is a unique paradox. It's the same, but not the same. There's people suffering in streets where they've got the traffic, but nobody suffers like we, where the cars are smashing up other cars. I mean, one truck wrote off 6 vehicles, smashed into them coming down the road. They're all trying to beat each other up and down the road. We all know it's a 2-way road, and it's half the width of parallel streets. You've seen the Google Maps. In the past, the growth in traffic in apartment blocks in Warren Road, it must have been designated as a dangerous street in the past because you put speed humps there. This has never fixed the problem. Things have got a lot worse. There's a lot more traffic there. It's the main driven thoroughfare, and we're asking where the streets where there's double the width, we're asking why they have all these restrictions with their trucks, and Woolies is not allowed to go on Renwick, but quite happily coming up a street half its width with traffic on both sides and everybody trying to get in and out of the area, including emergency vehicles as well. All residents have horror stories. I know many inner west drivers have them. I've just seen about the cars ripping out, being damaged, the cars flipped over, emergency vehicles stuck in the congestion. We've even seen a funeral procession blocked. They couldn't get through. They had all these other cars in the procession and they couldn't get through. Warren Road is a new apartment block at the top of Warren Road, and it'll be coming online shortly. We don't know how many parking spots they're going to take. And then there's been an approval for the 20 units with only 4 parking spots facing Woolworths in the dock. Anyway, Mirvac has already been mentioned. We have proof regarding Woolworths because we've got a video of the Woolworths trucks making a safe turn, whether it comes east or west. Either direction would solve this dangerous road. We are praying that there will not be enough further fatalities because we ignored it or failed to act. We are not yet a castigator, denigrate the council. We believe you're doing a fantastic job, and you should act in the interest of all with regards to safety and sensibility. Thank you very much for listening.
Christopher Deferral of Marrickville. Christopher here? Okay. Balmain Deferral of Marrickville.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on Warren Road traffic improvement matter. My name is Balmain from Randwick Street. I speak on behalf of the street. So there are three main points I would like to raise tonight. Number one, most foremost, the extent and level impact on both streets were not assessed and compared properly, including traffic volume, number of heavy vehicles, 85th of percentile travel speed, 5-year traffic accidents, and noise decibel level. A decision should be made by looking at all these factors by quantifying those impacts. Using the numbers presented by the council traffic study, the total traffic volume on Randwick Street will achieve 7 times the Warren Road traffic if option A is adopted in most likely scenario. And that is based on assumption that eastbound traffic will be diverted to Randwick Street, and around 50 to 60% of traffic will be diverted, westbound traffic will be diverted to Randwick Street. Second point is around heavy vehicle. There will be 8.7 times compared to Warren Road traffic in likely case scenario. Again, eastbound will be diverted to Randwick Street and also attract trucks from Carey Street. Not to mention if Marrickville is happening, all the construction of vehicles is going to happen on our street. Traffic speed on Randwick Street at 85th percentile is currently 30 to 50% faster. According to WHO, an increase in average speed is directly related to the likelihood of a crash occurring and the severity of consequences of crash. For example, every 1% increase in main speed produce a 4% increase in total crash risk and a 3% increase in the seriousness of crash risk. Option A means our traffic noise will increase to 77 decibels. By comparison, Warren Road noise level is 15 decibels. According to WHO guideline, no more than 55 decibels is encouraged. Long-term average exposure to levels about 55% decibels, similar to noise from busy street, can trigger elevated blood pressure and heart attacks. Main contribution is traffic noise and traffic speed. And the second main point I'd like to raise is that public consultation, the way it was conducted, was not inclusive of diverse community opinions. It was a very rushed consultation. Randwick Street was never consulted in the option development process. And the last time when we attended council meeting, when I called up council to follow up, I was advised this meeting, this proposal was not going to be going ahead for discussion.
Thank you. Your time has expired. If you could conclude,
Thanks.
please.
And you have the handout. Welcome to have a look.
Thank you very much. The next item for which we have registered speakers is item 6. I've been informed by both Mr. Johnson and Mr. Stafford that they won't be attending tonight, and so there's no need to go to them. They're not going to correct me and mistakenly be here. So the last item for which we have a registered speaker is item 14, Notice of Motion Chandos Street, and that speaker is Jared Teresi of Leichhardt.
Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm here to speak for the actual closure of Chandos Street. Although some councillors might actually know me as a consultant town planner, I'm actually here tonight as a resident of Chandos Street. I'm actually seeking council support for the actual either total closure of Chandos Street in full, or alternatively a arrangement where there's only a left out onto Parramatta Road. I've circulated a number of images I just want to walk you through. But in 2015, I actually prepared a submission to the West Connects project. And as part of that exhibition process, which in my personal opinion was actually a waste of time, this submission sought amongst a number of things the closure of Chandos Street. I also suggested as part of my submission the closure of Rogers Avenue, and at least West Connect considered that and did a part road closure for Rogers Avenue. Figure 1 is just simply identifying the actual Parramatta Road interchange, and Figure 2, or the next page, is emphasising where we have signalised intersections with both Chandos Street and Rogers Avenue, fundamentally being local streets. They're not a connecting road, they're just simply servicing the local residents. When you go through then the images, I've got a series of photos. This photo demonstrates now how, with the West Connects finish, you've got basically a merging lane occurring straight after Chandos Street. So you've got 3 lanes going into 2. Just recently, with the opening of the West Connects, up at the top part, you're now merging 2 lanes, 3 lanes again. So what is now happening is a normal amount of bottleneck, and the series of photos you see, which follows, shows what is generally happening is that it all gets clogged up, and out of frustration, people just turn straight into Chandos Street to get away from Parramatta Road, and that's what all the photos are showing. What I've tried to do in a positive way is I've provided the second last image, is a diagram which says that you can provide access to the commercial properties on the corner of Parramatta Road. You can actually give access off Chandos Street to those commercial properties, so they're not being prejudiced through existing crossings. And all you need to do is actually provide an island of planting, which is actually in between the 2 crossings in front of the childcare centre, and that in fact will stop vehicles turning left from Parramatta Road into Chandos Street. So no one's being disadvantaged. And I guess a bit of maybe some hypocritical comment from me as a planner, and I think it resonates with some of the other comments. Professionals will give you figures and data to justify whether you can or can't do anything. Amenity is sometimes can't be measured, and the reality is there's a lot of residents in our street who are very concerned, and at a very small cost can actually fix a problem. And I ask council to look at it in that context and fix what West Connect should have done properly in the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parisi. I'll hold over the 1 Merrill minute to be tabled this evening for later during the proceedings, which brings us to item 1, Tree Management DCP. Councillors, Councillor Macri.
I registered this morning
Right.
as part of the process.
Which item are you to speak to, sir?
Chandos Street.
Okay. Please come forward.
Thank you.
Be as brief as you can.
I will be. I'll be extremely brief. Thanks for the opportunity. Adrian Walton's my name. I've lived in Chandos Street for over 20 years, and somehow or another I've ended up being the unofficial spokesman for Chandos Street and surrounding streets. So I had a number of neighbours approach me about their concerns about the impact of Parramatta Road West Connects there, and they've asked me to put together a petition. So if I could just hand that through, please. And basically, this has been a concern for quite a while, and it's even got worse as per Jared's photos there, that there's increased rat running happening from say 7 a.m. in the morning until 9 a.m. and then there's more happening in the afternoon. We have a street there where as soon as you turn left into the street, you've got a preschool there full of kids, and then you've also got a 40-kilometre restriction with Haberfield Public School. So this isn't just a normal street. This is a street where there's a lot of kids moving around at certain times of the day. Obviously, there's been decisions made in Rogers Avenue where you can only turn out of Rogers Avenue, and people that don't want to use West Connects are using Parramatta Road. As soon as they see a blockage or the traffic hold up there, once again, that Jared's highlighted very clearly with those photos, is that it's actually getting worse, the amount of rat running that's happening through Chandos Street. So I'd just like to leave that with you now. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, brings us to item 1. Councillor Macri.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to move some amendments to the DCP policy. If they can come up on the screens, councillors can read them. There's about 3 pages of amendments. I'll actually read them out. That point 1, the following new objectives: to maintain and enhance the amenity of the Inner West local government area through preservation or preservation or appropriate tree and vegetation. B, to ensure the cost burden of meeting tree canopy targets does not fall unreasonably on property owners and lower income residents, in particular. C, to encourage private property owners to plant new trees and replace inappropriate trees in order to meet council's new tree canopy targets. Number 2 is to amend Objective 3 to read, to ensure the safety of the community, private property and public infrastructure assets. Amend prescribed trees list to 6 metres rather than 5 metres. A new exempt list of trees that are to be classed as the ability to remove without consent. Exempt works defined to amend. That's number 5 now. Number 5. I'm reading out the amendment, yeah. Exempt works and definition to amendment to allow canopy lifting to 2.5 metres above ground level without limitation on branch diameter. B, selective pruning to the 3 metre clearance above the roof from the face of all structures that are being impacted. 6, where a replacement of a tree is approved, council prefers that the trees are removed and replaced on site with a suitable replacement canopy tree and in a suitable location on site. However, there may be circumstances where there's no suitable location on site. For example, in case of small backyards, a financial contribution will be required to be paid to support a public tree planting to offset. Offset fees are established within council's fees and charges guidelines. 7, council approval is not required to prune or remove trees within 3 metres of an existing dwelling or auxiliary structure which has been approved through a development application or complying development certificate within the same lot as the tree. The distance is to be measured from the face of the tree to the trunk closest to the dwelling or structure to the external wall or roof line of the dwelling or structure. The definition, which may include a garage, carport, studio, shed, workshop, swimming pool, spa, retaining walls to the
I've got
height.
a point of order from Councillor Passos. I hadn't heard any interjections, but I'll ask everyone to remain quiet while Councillor Macri is reading out the amendments.
Retaining walls of the height greater than 600 millimetres. 8, development consent is required for works of approvable trees only following circumstances. All applications to be categorised the tree works permits and requests. A, the removal of trees identified in the NWS Council as heritage listed trees. The tree forms part of an Aboriginal object or located within an Aboriginal place of heritage. 9, the following criteria of assessment applications will form the guidelines to which tree applications with assessment criteria of the DCP to be amended to these. Danger. Danger is assessed based on a number of factors including the potential likelihood of a tree or part tree fail, a history of previous branch failure, the size of the defective part of the tree, and the use and occupancy of the area that may be struck if by the defective part of the tree. The tree exceeds 15 metres in height and within the strike zone of a habitable dwelling. Meeting the danger criteria gives significant determinative weight to the application to approve the removal or pruning of a tree. Property damage. The likelihood the tree is having an adverse impact on property, including trees renowned for extensive root systems, may cause damage to footings of houses, trees that cause blockages, domestic sewer and drainage lines. Condition of the tree. The structural integrity of the tree.
Of order, Chair.
Yes.
The Code of Meeting Practice 10.11.
Yes.
An amendment to a motion must relate to the matter being dealt with the original motion before the council, must not be a direct negative of the original motion. I'm concerned that this matter is actually rewriting the policy and therefore effectively is a direct negative. I'm not arguing about whether it's good, bad or indifferent. I'm just concerned that it goes beyond the scope of an amendment.
Let's let Councillor Macri conclude tabling the wording, and then I will make a ruling on whether it is a motion or an amendment. Please proceed, Councillor Macri.
Condition of tree. The structural integrity of the tree is assessed for any visible signs of decay, deterioration. This is usually indicated by a lack of foliage, dead branches evident in the canopy, presence of fungal fruiting bodies, excessive sap being extruded by the trunk, and or evidence of insect attack, particularly borer damage. Further likelihood of the species displays towards branch failure, subsequent limb fall. The health of the tree. The species susceptible to environmental changes which may affect the longevity of the species survival in the current locations. This would include changes to soil level, excessive root damage caused during construction works, changes in water availability, competition with other vegetation, particularly climbing vines, and the compaction of soil, particularly high usage areas such as parking areas. Complying development.
Councillor Macri, I'm going to ask you in the interest of brevity just to read out the headings for all of the criteria. They're available on the screen if anybody wishes to read them in detail, including for
Complying
councillors.
development, significance of streetscape, termites, circumstances. And the rest are just short abbreviations. I think the most important one of them all is dangerous tree assessments are to be based on the safety risks in all weather conditions, not normal conditions. So if the tree is all right in normal conditions, it has to be all right in all weather conditions, not normal conditions. And we're looking to insert some other clauses. I think I've been working with the mayor on this policy, and I think there'll be a few more amendments to it. So I'll just speak to the.
Okay, I'll begin your time now, Councillor Macri.
Okay. I think the reason I brought this forward is because trees have been giving us a number of problems on council. The number one complaint, other than parking, that I get is damage by trees and the impact of trees. And having waited 18 months for the policy to be amended to deal with the issues, I wasn't satisfied of what it brought forward back to us. So I looked at other tree DCPs around Sydney. I noted that...
Chair, I think I need at this point, given what Councillor Macri is saying, and I don't wish to interrupt Councillor Macri, but it's not about the point. The point of order does go back to 10.11. This is not an amendment to the motion before us. This is...
Primary motion.
Well, the matter before us is not addressed by Councillor Macri's motion.
The matter before us is a draft tree DCP policy.
Yeah.
What Councillor Macri is proposing is a very significant amendment to that policy. So that becomes the primary motion, as long as it includes the words at the beginning, which it doesn't currently, but can be amended to adoption of the policy. Then it will be the primary motion, and that will then need to be amended or a foreshadowed motion proposed, which could be the officer's recommendation. So I will rule that way. Councillor Macri has the floor.
So in looking at other tree DCPs, one of the particular issues I had was the 500 or half a metre setback required where people don't need consent to remove a tree. It's causing them problem from a primary dwelling. The issue is that it's measured from the middle of the tree, and the tree's measured at a 300 millimetre trunk, so effectively it's 350 centimetres from the actual building. Now, 350 millimetres. So what that means is effectively that tree would be growing under the eaves. So it didn't work, it didn't make sense. And we've heard from the residents here, and I've had enough feedback from the residents to know a more appropriate distance from any primary properties is actually 3 metres, as in the majority of the other DCPs around Sydney. Canterbury Bankstown has actually 5 metres from buildings. So that's why I went down that path. And my concern has always been the danger and what happens to people. In my time on council, I've just seen a number of trees that have had arborists look at them and they've fallen within days, even weeks after they've been inspected and passed sound. So the science is not there to say, well, we're going to come down to the last minute. Once a tree has reached a point, we have to seriously look at that and actually acknowledge that there is a problem there, and we have to acknowledge we need to replant. And the policy itself in the report previously showed that our tree canopy is diminishing.
So the controls we had were actually not working. They're not working. So we had to go in a different direction to encourage people to be more comfortable, to be able to plant and know they have more control over what they plant. And we want people to plant, and we want council to get involved in that. The other reason I looked heavily at the Hills District DCP was it was in partnership. It was done in partnership with the state government and an ecological expert. After the Hills District actually had a fatality of a young child at a school after a tree issue was denied to be trimmed. So those are the reasons why I went down that path looking for different solutions, because I wasn't content on what was brought in front of us. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Macri. Councillor Passos wishes to second the primary motion. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor?
Oh, yes, I do, most certainly. First of all, I would like to apologise to the residents of the Inner West Council for what they're being put through with the past and present policies. The Hills Mayor, the Hills Shire Council Mayor, made a statement, and I'll quote her: "I will make it easier for the residents to have trees removed because I don't want residents to stay awake worrying all night that a tree is going to fall on their house." That's what it comes down to. It comes down to people. I find it very interesting that, first of all, I'll say, how many councillors around this shoe have seen the submissions? Only me. I've got the submissions. And in some instances, they brought tears to my eyes, hence the apology for what we've put people through. I will also, and it's overwhelmingly in favour of changing the policy we had. I'll go into the notification. Since February 2018, I kept saying we need the notification to go out in different languages. That was ignored. Horrible, awful people of West Connex, they were able to do that, but our council couldn't. Our council told the people, you can contact our interpreter service. Nowhere in the report tells us how many people use that service. Because if you can't read the leaflet, you cannot read, you're told to contact the interpreter service. There's been a battle against these whole amendments from day one. I have yet to come across a resident that said they don't want trees. It is not a matter of saving trees, this exercise we're going through now. It is a matter to alleviate the fears that our residents have, the expense that our residents are put through. And it is not good enough to say, if the tree's blocking your sewer, move your sewer line. And it's not good enough to say, you have to prune and maintain your trees. How much has this council paid out in compensation? We've never been told. Why isn't council pruning and maintaining their trees? Hundreds of trees are left to die. Doesn't matter, we've got an open checkbook. Ratepayers will pay. Let's just throw a few more in. Doesn't matter, we don't have the resources or staff to maintain them. Yet we insist residents do it. Remove one tree, you have to replace it with two. That's extortion.
Councillor, your time has expired.
Why are you telling residents they have to pay for two trees when they've only removed one?
Councillor, your time has expired.
Absolute extortion.
Thank you for that. I wish to speak briefly in support of the primary motion and also to propose another couple of amendments to be incorporated, I hope, into the primary motion. I might speak to those first, which I've provided to the minute taker. Firstly, I do think that there needs to be an additional layer of review for residents who feel like they have been hardly done by or have not had their concerns listened to. Until a couple of years ago, most tree applications that came in were dealt with as DAs, And a couple of years ago, councillors were removed from determining DAs. Now, there were some good reasons for that across the state, not necessarily applicable to this council. But one of the consequences of that has been that there's been no avenue for appeal. So I'm proposing an amendment that we specifically delegate the CEO, who's sitting to my right, with responsibility for reviewing determinations. If a resident receives a determination or a condition on their application that they're not happy with, the CEO personally will be required under this amendment to review that determination, to put a fresh set of eyes and hopefully apply some common sense to the situation. Secondly, in relation to the issue of exempt weeds, which was raised by one of the speakers, I agree. There should be no height requirement for the removal of exempt weeds. Weeds are toxic. Weeds are an imposition on our natural environment. We don't want them at any height. And so I'm further moving that there be no height requirement for the removal of exempt weeds. And camphor laurels are an obvious example of that. There's not many of them that are under 10 metres. So it would be redundant to say that we're going to include them in our weeds list if we weren't going to allow them to be removed. I think that this is an important change based on common sense. As one speaker said, trees and canopy are vital, but not more important than human beings. And these amendments represent a quite substantial policy change. And I want to allude to a couple of examples of that. Firstly, these amendments allow for a simple rule that says if a tree is too close to a property, it can be removed. Not you'll need to go and spend $10,000 on arborists and engineers' reports. If it is simply too close to the property to be safe and is likely to cause problems in the future, it can be replaced. Secondly, this proposal from Councillor Macri moves the vast majority of applications out of the realm of a DA and into a tree permit, which will be much easier for local residents to deal with. And lastly, the assessment criteria which Councillor Macri proposes essentially turn the process here at Council on its head, with the primary weighting being given to safety of people and safety and protection of property. Now, that doesn't mean that we are not committed to expanding canopy, but as Councillor Macri said, we need to restore the relationship of respect and trust between the council and residents in relation to trees so that people will feel confident that they can plant more trees in their backyard without it later on becoming a problem for them. So I support the Macri-Passos recommendation, and I hope that all councillors will do so as well. Further discussion. I've got Councillor Lockie.
I'd like to move a foreshadow motion as the officer's recommendation, not to discount what looks like an intensive amount of work that Councillor Macri and Councillor Byrne have done in proposing amendments, but they are very, very extensive amendments to what is already a very complex policy area. My concern is I've had no notice of the changes. We have not, to my knowledge, had any opportunity for the officers to assess and advise us on what the impact of those changes to what is in the draft DCP in front of us would be. Should the primary motion fail and we vote on the foreshadowed motion, I'm very happy to look at amendments to that to strengthen it, but my vast preference is to vote for a motion that we have had the analysis on and that we've had the months of work go into.
I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Stamoulis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've looked at the Councillor Macri's primary motion, the Macri-Passos motion, and I think there's a lot of things in there that work very well for our residents. They put our residents in the picture. It no longer becomes a political issue only. It's one that we converse with our residents and we discuss it with them. That is, we have a major exercise to do. That's planting and greening of our environment. We can't simply throw the big stick at our residents. We need to involve them, work with them, and I think this motion goes somewhere to doing that. We need to look after their property, we need to look after them, and we need to make sure they're involved. And we need to increase our canopy in the inner west. I think those things can be better done working with our residents than having a rule book. So I'm conscious there, and I've looked at the detail of Councillor Macri's amendments. I think they do satisfy those two key principles of mine: increasing our canopy, greening our environment, and looking after and including our residents. That's the important part to me. Now, I do have a couple of amendments myself that I would like to include. And by the way, I do support that the CEO it will be used as a process of review. I think that's a very good process, and I'll certainly be supporting that amendment to the motion. For me, there are three amendments that I'd like to make. I think our businesses also need to take a more active role in increase of canopy. So I would like to move an amendment that where we have a 15% canopy in business zones, I think we could effectively move that to 25%. That is, we increase the tree canopy in business zones to 25% rather than the 15% target that we have in the policy. Also, a lady mentioned earlier that we need to inform people, and we used to inform people some decades ago about where to appropriately plant trees, how to appropriately do these, and what the species are. So I have here that to assist residents to plant trees in places that will ensure the health and vigour of the tree and to reduce risk, Council will provide information and advice on its website. That's another amendment. And then finally, I'd like to remove the politics out of this discussion and place some statistics in this discussion. And that is, I would like to ensure that we all have solid and good information about the removal of trees, the planting of the trees, and also the increase in canopy, which is our objective. And to that effect, I'm proposing that to reflect the importance of trees in our community, a range of summary statistics be reported by Council on a quarterly basis. This includes applications by type, number of tree removals, number of tree plantings, and if possible, costs associated with this. Statistics should also be provided for the public domain as well as the private domain, such as tree removals, tree plantings, total stock of trees, and tree canopies, so we know what is happening there on an empirical basis of how we're progressing and how our performance is managed over time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll ask Councillor Macri and Councillor Passos just to take note of the amendments that both Councillor Stamoulis and myself have moved, so that I can come to you and ask if you are willing to incorporate them. Councillor Hesse, and then Councillor Stigg.
Thanks, Chair. When former Liberal New South Wales Premier Mike Baird played on the fear of trees a couple of elections ago and allowed the removal of trees willy-nilly, particularly on the north side of Sydney, the chainsaws were buzzing. And the people of Sydney, but particularly the North Shore, trees were cleared, useful trees were cleared, trees have provided the lungs of Sydney indeed. The lungs of the inner west are about to be cauterised if this motion gets through. We've basically said to the staff, we don't matter, we don't care what your expertise is, we're just going to junk it. So even though I've got a history degree and Councillor Macri's got training in hairdressing and other people have got various training in various things, it doesn't make it irrelevant. But what do we know about trees? Quite frankly, between us, not much.
We know they fall in our head, and we know they kill people.
I'll call the meeting to order. I'm about to
fear and loathing created by certain councillors doesn't actually help the discussion about what a good tree policy is for our area. Now, I respect every person who's come here tonight on whatever you've spoken on, even those of you who've been organised by Councillor Passos. Now, you've got your own view, and I really do respect that.
I'll ask you to address the Chair, Councillor Hesse.
However, we did not take the opportunity to bring a lot of people who like trees, which is, according to council statistics, around about 94% of...
Would you like to elaborate on that?
I'll ask you to address
the point of order to me as Chair, Councillor Passos. Would you like to look at my phone and see how many people I rang?
Councillor Passos.
The people rang me, my dear fellow.
Okay. The meeting is adjourned for a period of 5 minutes.
Don't you accuse me of ringing.
Councillors, I'll resume the meeting momentarily. I'll ask all of the residents to resume their seats. I'll resume the meeting. Councillor Hesse has the floor. Please resume his time.
I should just say for the record, I wish to second Councillor Lockie's motion.
Yes?
Foreshadowed motion.
Please proceed.
I'll start with, given this has all been an ambush, speaking of bushes, I think we can take as an example one of the problems, which is Councillor Byrne's amendment for those species which are listed as weed species, anything basically, you can just take them out. I think that's, I understand it, there's no height limit at this point. Many of the older heritage buildings in this new local government area were planted with gardens of non-native species. You wouldn't recommend you plant them today, but they are part of the heritage. This is just one example, but if this council is of a view to pass this motion, that means you have removed potentially every heritage garden in this municipality. That's what they can do. Tomorrow they'll take the chainsaws out and they'll take them down. That's the effect of it. It may not be intended, but that's the effect. That's just one example.
It's not, but please proceed.
Well, it's the effect, Councillor Byrne, with respect, which is more than you've shown a lot of the community by with this ambush this evening.
Well, I haven't abused any residents, so let's stick to the issue.
Neither have I. I've been on the receiving end of a bit, but that's okay. I've been around. I can take it. I think really we have to look at what's reasonable. What's been proposed by Councillor Macri is reactive.
I have a point of order, and I believe Councillor Hesse should apologise to what he said to the resident. That's uncalled for. The language he used to a resident was absolutely disgusting.
Please resume your seat. Thank you, Councillor Passes.
I'm calling on him to apologise.
I understand that. I'm going to suggest that whatever, I've already been able to talk to a couple of the residents and to suggest that notwithstanding the inflammatory nature of the conduct of the councillors toward each other, I'm asking for your cooperation to have no interjections in this debate. If you've come to see the policy adopted tonight, it won't be if I have to abandon the meeting. So let's make sure that doesn't occur. I'm going to suggest that we deal with any matter pertaining to what you've raised, Councillor Passes, subsequent to this meeting, and ask for everyone's cooperation to have no further interjections. Councillor Hesse has 30 seconds remaining.
We go to the question of safety of people. That's a big question, and we know full well that if we don't have tree cover, then the safety of people in the years to come with global warming and the heating of our city is in peril. We remove our forest, our urban forest, much of which is actually on private land, at our peril. The people in this chamber tonight and all those listening or not listening will be affected and devastated if this goes through. I ask all councillors to at the very least defer and preferably vote against this policy. Thank you.
Councillor Steer.
Yes, I point out that under clause 9.1 of the Code of Meeting Practice, the council must not consider business at a meeting of the council unless a councillor has given notice of the business as required by clause 3.6 and unless notice of that business has been sent to the councillors in accordance with clause 3.6 in the case of an ordinary meeting. Councillor Macri has given us a totally new proposal that we have never seen before, or I correct that councillors De Cruz, Kiat, myself, Hesse and Lockie have never seen
I'm going to make a
before.
ruling on what is
And
clearly a point of order.
Yes, thank you.
Now, I'll just make a brief explanation. Notice is required to be given. That is, a motion not relating to business on the agenda could not be presented here tonight, but policies can be amended by councillors. I don't think it's a legitimate argument to suggest that Councillor Macri's proposed policy is not relevant, given it is a tree DCP policy and the matter on the agenda is a tree DCP policy. Councillor Steer, I've made that ruling. Do you wish to speak to the matter?
Can I clarify something?
Yes, I wish to speak to that matter. And so first of all, I want to point out...
Councillor Passes.
I want to point out that...
Point of order.
The Amazon is on fire as we speak. It is releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the air. We will all be gasping for breath very, very soon. The forests of Alaska are already showing the signs of climate change. The pine trees are dying and being replaced by broadleaf deciduous trees. The salmon are dying in their masses. What is happening here?
Into order.
What is happening here is in the face of global warming and climate change. Trees are the lifeblood. They are the lungs of our world. And in the inner west, they clean the air, which is the most polluted part of Sydney. They provide shelter for wildlife, and they provide shade for humans and animals alike. And also, for those of you people who are so concerned about your houses, they raise your property values by 7 to 18%. 7 to 18%. That is real dollars, in a minimum of $20,000 to $50,000 on your property prices. You love your home so much. Think about that.
Councillor Steer,
Now, the majority of and you're also worried about trees falling
Councillor
on
Steer,
you.
I'll ask you to address the chair.
I am addressing the chair. And residents claim that they're worried about trees falling on them. The three most common causes of death in the home are poisoning through accidental overdose, falls, and fire and burn injuries. In other words, human error, not trees falling on them. Trees falling on people is a rarity, and it is used as an excuse by people who want to do nothing but raise our urban forest to the ground. And they want to concrete the entire inner west, leaving no living blade of grass or leaf anywhere. And when that happens, we will have a desert. The streets will be 20 degrees C higher than they are now. And people will be cowering inside their houses because they will be afraid to walk on the street. Pavements will melt. Pavements will melt, and people will suffer more because of the selfishness of this proposal. Furthermore, even if this was the best proposal on earth, giving it to the Greens councillors and Councillor Lockie without any warning whatsoever is a disgusting thing to do. It is nothing but an ambush. Has no respect for the 448 residents who made submissions on the original Tree DCP, 80% of whom approve the Tree DCP. It is insulting the staff who have worked so hard on the Tree DCP, and it flies in the face of the majority wish of the residents of this area, which is to preserve our urban forest and increase the urban canopy.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Kiat.
I have a question through the chair.
Yes.
My first question is, we've had these proposals at short notice, but through the chair, can we get some preliminary views on the potential
Call
impact
the meeting to order.
of the proposal on our urban forest, and compared to what the recommendation, the Tree DCP recommended is?
I'll put that question to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Councillor. We understand that the proposals from Councillor Macri are based on the current processes in place in the Hillshire area. We note that the Hillshire area has a 50% canopy cover, whilst the inner west has currently on average an 18% canopy cover, and we've relayed that information to the councillor as part of his consideration. Clearly the policy decision is one for the councillors, not for the staff. But in our advice, we've made clear that the hills could not, in our view, be properly considered as a benchmark for an older inner city area. Second issue is that the internal review process being considered is more or less in place, but confirming it and putting it in the process that the Mayor has proposed, we're comfortable with that. We've been dealing with a number of other issues and given advice that some of the issues that have been raised are not significant. The 3 metre rule is significant. Councillor Macri also sought some advice about pruning greater than 100 millimetres in diameter at the branch collar where things were overhanging. We've given him some advice about instability of the tree, which he's accepted and taken that on board. I think still our greater concern is the exemption list and the way that some of those trees might be dealt with. The exemption list I've only just seen for the first time tonight, and while generally on that list we would probably support 29 of the 30 listed in the top list there. I don't know if you have that piece of paper in front of you.
Circulated to all councillors.
The tree we're concerned about is the Kaffir plum. We're not sure that should be on the list. In the lower list of trees less than 10 metres, the numbers 5, 6 and 7 we'd recommend would be removed from that list. They're the Bunya pine, Norfolk Island pine and hoop pine, as they're significant trees in their own right. We think should go through a process before removed. But again, that's a matter for council to deal with. There are some other bits and pieces we'd be concerned about. Just one of the members of the public was concerned about the heritage trees list. We've made it clear to the councillors that our concern is for the Inner West heritage trees list themselves. So we think that's in the order of about 50 trees rather than 1,000 trees that might be affected.
No, sorry, no.
Excuse me, where is the heritage tree list? No one can find it.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to.
Can somebody tell me where it is?
No, I'm going to allow the Chief Executive to conclude his answer to Councillor Kiat, and then you'll be able to pose that question subsequently.
Thank you.
And then Councillor Macri also asked as to whether councillors themselves should be involved in the process of considering either permits or applications, and we're able to refer him to the relevant part of the Environment Protection Act, Part 4, Division 4.2, Section 4.8, Clause 2, that these matters are considered under the Act as they are development assessments, and therefore it's not appropriate that councillors are involved, and he accepted that advice as well. So we've sought to give advice on the matters that have been raised before us. At a council officer level, our concern will be the 3-metre rule, but again, that's a matter for councillors to determine.
Councillor Kiat.
Thank you, Mr. Deegan. Just to follow up on that point about the 3-metre rule, just a further question through the chair.
Yes.
Do we have any idea, I would assume that a large number of private trees would fall within that 3-metre rule, especially in suburbs like Newtown, more dense suburbs. Do we have any idea about how many trees this would impact and that could be potentially removed without any consent at all?
I'll put that question to the Chief Executive.
Our estimate of the tree canopy cover in private homes is across the areas 70 to 80% of the tree cover within the 18% tree canopy is in private homes. How many of those are trees that would be potentially able to be removed on this? We don't have that data at this stage, but we will need to consider that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kiat.
When people ask me about this council, I often say it's the tail wagging the dog. I think when people elected 5 Greens and 5 Labor, 10 out of 15 from progressive parties, they expected a progressive council, and that's what was promised. That is not what we're getting. We're actually getting, to everyone's surprise, we're actually getting exactly what Councillor Passis wants on trees. Now, with respect to the people who've spoken today...
Call the meeting to order. Councillor Kiat has the floor.
With respect to the people who've spoken today, I actually really appreciate you coming to speak, and I think you've come in good faith. You've spoken about problems that you've experienced with respect to trees. You had no idea what was going to be proposed tonight. Like, none of us had any idea what was going to be proposed tonight. Our council officers did not know what was going to be proposed tonight, and they do not know what the impact will be. We don't know how many trees we're going to lose. We know we're already losing our tree canopy. And even our community strategic plan, number 1 priority is to improve the urban canopy, to increase the urban forest. We are now taking a drastic backward step. And we're just handing to Councillor Passis and to Councillor Macri what they want on trees. This is not what you're asking for. And in terms of the consultation that we had on this tree DCP, 80% of residents supported it, out of over 400 who responded. We've had a few who've come tonight who have raised some issues. and they could have been addressed, but that's not what is happening tonight. What is happening tonight is Councillor Passis's agenda on trees is being delivered by Mayor Byrne.
Councillor Passis has a point of order.
I'm living rent-free in your head and your mates.
Okay, Councillor Passis,
It's
that
not
is not
about
a point of
Councillor
order.
Passis. It's about the residents.
Councillor Passis, that is not a point of order. I would like to conclude the deliberation about this matter. I won't be able to if there's ongoing interjections. I'll ask you to desist. Councillor Kiat has the floor.
To be fair, this has nothing to do with residents. The residents who have spoken tonight have raised...
I'll call the meeting to order. I'm certainly going to insist that residents not interject while councillors are speaking. Councillor Kiat has the floor.
The residents who have spoken tonight have raised legitimate issues that we should address. But what is happening tonight is a proposal that is coming the first time we've seen it, the first time our officers have seen it, and it will take us a drastic step backwards in terms of the way that we deliver our urban forest. It's not what... Did you guys draft this policy? I don't think so. It was drafted by the councillors who are presenting it tonight and defending it tonight, and really, we don't know what the impact will be, but we've just heard that around 70 to 80% of our urban forest is on private properties. A lot of that could be impacted by what's proposed tonight. We don't know how much. So what I'd say to councillors considering voting for this motion is, let's take pause. We don't know what the impact will be. I mean, we know that our residents actually want us to increase the urban forest, and that's what residents have said tonight. But this is not what we're delivering. We're actually doing the opposite. So let's take some time. Let's let our officers give us some advice on this. Let's hear from residents on this. We actually haven't heard from residents on this proposal.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no further discussion, Councillor De Cruz.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to the residents for coming in, because I think it's certainly worthwhile to hear from a wide range of people the issues they face in living in the inner west. And I mean, trees are certainly a difficult and fraught issue, but I think the issue here is it's being blown out of all proportion. I mean, we've got statistics. Councillor Steers already mentioned that you're more likely to be injured by poisons which you clean your house with. You're more likely to have your dog. You're more likely to be killed or injured by a car. And we seem to have a disproportionate reaction to trees and those poor sharks. So I think we really do need to take a step back, because we're actually living in an environment where we do have these trees, and it makes it a much more pleasant environment to live in. We can do the heat maps, we can look at the temperature. On Saturday, we played at the new netball courts on concrete. This is in August, and it was stinking hot. If we don't have trees, we're not going to be able to survive. And if we fill up all our blocks with construction and don't have any trees and vegetation, it is going to be stinking hot and almost unbearable. So I think we need to be really careful and think about how we manage our urban forest and how we actually work with our residents to make sure we come out with a good environment for us all to live in. We have a community which walks. You can't walk in the stinking heat. The Queenslanders have realised that people are not walking. The trees actually cool the environment. The air conditioning you're going to require if we don't have trees, which cool the environment significantly. So I think instead of saying that the trees do all these evil things, we do actually have to keep it in perspective of what the trees deliver to us and try and keep that in mind in how we manage the trees. With regard to the long list of amendments that Councillor Macri has put forward to the policy, I mean, we cannot even consider those. I mean, when you put forward a policy, you actually have to put something to public exhibition. So that in itself is invalid to expect us to adopt that policy right now. With this list, I'm not sure which the 29 which were acceptable to the officers, but one of the ones I see on this list is actually a native tree. So I've got a concern with that. There are several other trees on this which are significant trees. which we should be concerned about having them just destroyed. And there's lots of people have different attitudes. I mean, the Camphor Laurel has been a headache, but it's been pointed out to me that it still does provide an advantage. I live across the road from a school, and they've trimmed those trees, but that provides crucial shade for those for those kids in that school. So I urge everyone to vote for the foreshadowed motion and a vote against the long list of amendments that have been put forward.
We've heard from a big majority of councillors now. I'll go to Councillor Macri for his right of reply. Before he does so, I'll ask him to confirm whether he's amenable to incorporating the amendments that have been proposed by myself and Councillor Stamoulis. They are incorporated into the primary motion. Councillor Macri.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Look, first of all, I'll clarify a couple of things. If you read the objectives, the objectives are to maintain and enhance amenity in the West local government area through preservation of appropriate trees and vegetation, to ensure the cost burden of meeting tree canopy targets does not fall unreasonably on property owners and lower income residents in particular. Now, encourage private property owners to plant new trees and replace inappropriate trees in order to meet council's tree canopy targets. Now, that's not raising the place. Now, I appreciate the awesome well speech that Councillor Steer gave. It was very stimulating. It reminded me of War of the Worlds. But personal attacks, saying what people do or what people think, I'm not a tree specialist, but I am elected here to represent the concerns. I didn't write that list. That's a list that was prepared by an ecologist. Okay, so that's not my list.
I'll call the meeting to
order.
They
put their name to it. Yes, they put their name to it.
Councillor Macri has the floor. Councillor Macri has the floor.
And as far as not circulating to other councillors, I've been here for 2.5 years. I've never received anything from the Greens when they were putting up amendments to policy or anything like that. So I don't know how you can say I haven't.
I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Macri has the floor.
Okay.
I'll ask the minute takers to stop the clock. Councillor Macri has the floor. Please proceed.
So this is about getting a better, greener outcome. Now you can laugh, but the staff have written in their report that.
I'll call the meeting to order, Councillor Passis. Councillor Macri has the floor. Councillor Macri has the floor. I will adjourn the meeting momentarily if it doesn't discontinue.
Just, Julie, can you please let me finish?
Councillor Macri has the floor.
Now, what this is about is enhancing. The council officers themselves said that this policy is not working. When you look at the policy we've been asked to adopt, it's virtually identical to the policy we had before. The changes in there are minuscule, saying 350 centimetres from a building, millimetres, 350 millimetres from 350 millimetres from the building, right? That's what it is. That's not a shift, right? Most councils have 3 metres to 5 metres. I didn't go for the extreme of 5. I went for the average, which was 3. Those are things that are written by actual people that know what they're doing. Ecologists, right? We asked for change.
Councillor Macri, I'll ask you to address the chair. Councillors, I'll ask you to desist from interjecting. Councillor Macri has 40 seconds remaining.
We asked for change. That's why we brought this motion up. We saw a problem. We were constantly getting this wave of people. Just the other week, I had an 80-year-old lady. There was a tree on the property adjacent to hers. The owner said, yeah, I'll take it out. Councillor, I'll get permission. The lady rang me up. She goes, the lady came out. She stayed for about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. She said, what a wonderful tree, what a wonderful tree. But what about the paving and all the concrete it's lifting? I can't get my walking frame over it. I can't access my house. And all the staff member could say, what a wonderful tree. $240. And that was $240 for that. I don't think that returns any value to people with that situation.
Councillor Macri, your time has expired. Well, we don't need to move to put it. It's being put now. So we've got the primary motion from Councillor Macri and Councillor Passis for adoption of the policy with the list of amendments that Councillor Macri has articulated. We then got a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Lockie, seconded by Councillor Hesse, for adoption of the officer's recommendation. We'll deal with the primary motion. If it's defeated, we'll then vote on the foreshadowed motion. Could all those in support of the Macri-Passos recommendation please raise your hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That has been carried. The tree DCP has been adopted. Thank you very much for coming along. Next item, item 2. Sydney Eastern City Planning Panel. Councillors, Councillor McKenna. I might just, Councillor McKenna, if I can ask you to wait just one moment. I'm just going to ask anyone who was here for that matter and who's now heading home, if you could leave the chamber now so that we can allow you to do so and then get on with the debate.
You didn't tell us where the heritage list is.
Excuse. I'm going to ask one of the officers to go and speak to that citizen.
Yeah, where's the heritage tree list?
No, I'm sorry. We're just waiting for the chamber to be cleared so that we can move on to the next item. I'll ask one of the officers or the chief executive to speak to the resident.
Come on, everybody, get out your chainsaws quick.
Mine's already oiled.
But that's what they think we're going to do. They think we're going to all go home with chainsaws.
Okay, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular proposal for the 368, I think it is, rooms boarding house in Summerhill is just an outrage. I firstly just would like to make a couple of general comments. I'm just not quite sure what type of community we think we're creating. A boarding house for 368 people, which will probably be 40 to 50% of the residents living in Carlton Crescent in this one building. The bright sparks in the New South Wales government who dreamt up this SEP from both sides of government, did they really envisage this? Did we really think we were going to have boarding houses with 400 people in them when we, in the past, we've mostly dealt with 30, 40 people, up 50, but 400, nearly 400 is just crazy. It's a commercial proposal with student leaders as the managers 24 hours a day. So how does that work? Perhaps, and the concern is that, as we know, many students are exploited and underpaid, and of course international students are mostly restricted by their work visas. Their work is restricted by their visas, and even more of the international students are exploited and underpaid. Now, the numbers are extraordinary. This company that's proposing to do this has got 5 of these blocks in Sydney, 2 in Brisbane, 1 I think in Melbourne and another one coming, and of course then the one in Summerhill. They're huge. Their rates in Sydney range from $480 a week up to $600 odd. So they are not providing what we would call cheap accommodation for students. So we as a council, but this brings me to page 53 in the report that came to us, which is in relation to, which is where we find the council's development and traffic engineers' comments about the application providing no parking, not even one disability space. We as a council lobbied the state government to change the rules on boarding houses, and now we had the changes, 0.5 of a space for each room, and now we're going to let these people get away with not one single space, not even a disability space. They say the footpath's in good order. It's not in good order. It's dreadful. The side of the footpath is at 45 degrees. It's a slap in the face for this community, this whole process, and this should be refused if we have no other grounds for refusal but the refusal on the parking issues, which is what I have proposed. Thank you.
Very good timing, Councillor McKenna. Councillor McKenna will move that submission be made. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor York. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor York? No? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion or to amend it? Councillor De Cruz.
We will manage to have this item deferred, but I've just got a few amendments in the design of the building, which I hope can be included in the submission. And they are that we include natural drying in the design of the building, cross ventilation, flood. One of the main issues the officers have picked up is the flooding issues.
No, that's just mine.
And that's a water sensitive urban design be designed into the structures and the planning. It was unclear to me what gardening space, what landscaping was available. One of the issues that seemed to be missing was bicycle paths. There was mention of footpaths, but not bicycle paths. And bicycle charging facilities, and a food waste management plan. So I would ask that Councillor,
as well as the council officers.
that Councillor McKenna considers those.
We're making a separate submission.
Considers these issues to be included in the submission.
I'm sorry. They were
Okay.
asking. Now, can you
So you've moved that we make a submission
Yes.
to this,
Yeah.
and so I'm asking that we include some further points in that submission in regard to what we would like to see. So I'll try and send that to Catherine. So it was cross ventilation, natural drying, just to repeat it again. The flood management issues which the staff have brought up as a grounds for rejecting the proposal, and I've also got bicycle access. There didn't seem to be anything about bicycle access, which I presume is actually the main way people are going to travel since these are students, and electric bicycle charging, because all these bicycles seem to be electrical these days. So I hope you will include and a food waste management plan, because I noticed there were comments about recycling, but not food waste management, which, given there's a lot of residents in such a dwelling, that food waste.
Councillor McKenna, I presume your intention was to include the officers' reasons for refusal as well in the submission?
The officers have made their submission.
Yes.
So this is another submission.
Yes.
So
But do you wish to include their reasons for refusal in relation to the flooding in the council's
I'm happy for
submission?
them to be included in our submission as well, of course, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you could amend the...
Am I having my right of reply? Does
No,
anyone-
not just yet. I'll come back to you for that. So, Councillor De Cruz, I'll need you to liaise with the minute taker and perhaps with Councillor McKenna about the amendment to the submission that you're proposing. That will need to be in writing. Councillor McKenna has agreed. You suggested that there should be the officer's reasons for refusal. That's incorporated. So, but we'll just need to get the rest of the wording. Is there anyone
All right,
else who
with the
wishes to
rest?
further amend the submission? If not, I'll go to Councillor McKenna for her right of reply. Councillor De Cruz, I'll ask you to make sure that the minute takers have got your wording prior to the conclusion of her right of reply. Councillor McKenna.
I'm sorry, I didn't. There is a management plan which I didn't get around to looking at. So I'm assuming that the waste issues that were raised by the officers are part of that management plan, but it's no harm in putting something else in. But I actually had another couple of points in there, but I can't see all of my things, so, and I don't have a copy of it here. I do have a copy of it. This is very, where is it? What's that? Yes, can we have it
Councillor
scrolled
McKenna.
up, please? I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just going to pause Councillor McKenna's contribution there. Councillor McKenna has the floor. Could I ask that the minute takers scroll up so that she's able to read all of, and perhaps change the font size, so that she's able to read all of the amendment that she has moved?
Right, so the other
motion that she's
issues
moved?
that were concerning me, besides the reasons for refusal, that we also have this possible position that the panel will approve it. And of course, the report does give already the conditions of consent in relation to. So this is what Councillor De Cruz is talking about. There were two issues that I wanted raised as conditions to go into the conditions, if possible. The footpath from the site to the Summerhill Hotel car park driveway be upgraded to be fully accessible, including the grass verge. It is not. It's the only access for people with a disability. There's no disability car space. So the report actually says that they can walk to the station. The other thing it says, we can also catch a bus. Well, there's no buses in Summerhill. And the other thing is that the fire hydrant and associated infrastructure be located in a recessed area, enclosed and appropriately signposted. And this is to avoid that great big red thing being right at the front of the building and right on the footpath, because this building is just a small recess from the actual footpath. And Councillor De Cruz, what were yours?
Can you get them up?
They're on the screen too? Oh, that council submission also include the following matters: cross ventilation, natural drying of washing, bicycle path access and signage between storage and cycle. Well, those things can all go in as condition, would have to go in as conditions of consent, I would imagine, and so I'm happy to include those things.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's agreed. I'll now put the McKenna-York motion. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item, alcohol-free zones, Balmain, New Year's Eve. Is there any discussion? If not, Councillor Macri will move the adoption, seconded by Councillor Iskander. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Local Traffic Committee. Right. Councillor Hessie's going to retrieve Councillor Kiat. Councillor Macri. Councillor Macri is moving the recommendation. Councillor Iskander, do you wish to? Councillor Iskander has tabled an amendment, which I'm seconding in relation to item 3 within the Traffic Committee. Fairly uncontroversial, which is about requesting pedestrian crossings rather than pedestrian islands around the Sydney Metro working site. Is that incorporated, Councillor Macri? Okay, so that's incorporated. Yes? Can I ask you to turn your microphone on, please?
Chair, just to get a report on the car share spaces, we are actually adding in more car share spaces into the area. And as much as I think it's a good thing, but on balance, when the residents look at it, it's taking up on-street parking and causing grief. And their concern is that if they're in a residential parking zone, they have to actually pay for a permit. Now, GoGet doesn't actually pay to any licence fee or anything for that, and I think that should be investigated now. It was one thing when they started 15 years ago, roughly, but now they've grown to a business that has 3,400 vehicles, 100,000 members, and they're growing at the rate of 26% per year. So they're a pretty lucrative business now, and I don't think we should be prioritising public space for a business to make money as much as it makes good sense. I think they need to contribute something back, because a resident pays for a parking permit has no guarantee that they're going to get a spot in their resident parking zone, but this is a guaranteed spot for the go-get. So I'd just like a report to come back as a possible licence fee or charge per year.
Okay, so Councillor Macri's got an amendment that currently reads that Traffic Committee receive a further report on car share spaces on a potential fee for car spares.
Yes.
Car share
Annual
spaces
fee.
in our
Annual
LGA.
fee.
I'll just confirm though that the recommendation of the Traffic Committee to adopt the Go-Get car share spaces is adopted under the resolution. Yes. Okay, Councillor McKenna.
I think that is something wrong with my mic. We had a resolution to council just a couple of weeks ago to actually go down this path. So the Traffic Committee considered the motion that was passed by this council just 2 or 3 meetings ago. So why would we be wanting to get another report? It was we wanted it done. It seems to me contradictory.
Just to clarify, Councillor McKenna, which I just attempted to do with Councillor Macri, so the recommendation is for adoption of the report, including the allocation of those spaces, but that further consideration be given to a broader policy about whether there's a fee. So,
Whether we charge Go-Get
for their spaces generally, not for the spaces adjacent to train stations, which we're adopting tonight. That makes sense. Councillor Hesse.
Thanks, Chair. Are we talking about the Traffic Committee report in whole, aren't we? I think
yes.
At this point, right. Look, I'd just like to come to the issue that we had a lot of speakers on tonight, that is item 4 Warren Road. I'm not sure, I think there are a few people still here, and I wish to acknowledge all those speakers, both for and against. As they will know, this is where I live too. I don't actually live on Warren Road or Renwick Street, but it is an area where I walk my dog in every day. So I'm very well aware of the issues. I want to acknowledge to Ms Deferral that the proposed change will increase, if it's supported by council in principle tonight, will increase traffic on Renwick Street. That is true. And it's an ugly situation that we as councillors have to contemplate. However, the issue with Warren Road is one I believe we can't continue to sustain. As I think it was Ms Beaumont said earlier, there has been a fatality on Warren Road. I've actually myself witnessed a car door being ripped off as someone opened the door. A cab went through. It wasn't the cab driver's fault. It was actually the person who opened the door. But that is the problem with Warren Road. It is so narrow. Renwick Street is a much wider street. It allows an opportunity for people for two-way traffic as well as parking on each side of the road to be done safely. Thank you, I think, to Mr Petchler, I spoke to earlier today, to clarify a few things. If the matter is passed this evening, there will be further discussions with the RMS and council regarding the traffic management plan. I know that there are a number of councillors, I'm sure, who've expressed views to Mr Petchler on behalf of residents to make sure that we do as much as we can to make sure that the safety issues on Renwick Street are addressed. I know that Councillor Macri is nodding. I wish to acknowledge that we're all keen to make sure that safety, particularly for pedestrians, but all people, is something that's looked after very seriously. I know Councillor Scan will be in the same boat. We want this to be as safe as possible, but the situation on Warren Road, frankly, is out of control and untenable. I agree, Councillor Macri. So I just want to acknowledge that it's a difficult situation and that it does have an impact on you, but the impact on residents of Warren Road is simply, well, untenable. I'll take Councillor Macri's words, they're the good ones. So I just want to put my hand up saying that's what I'm going to do, that's why I'm going to do it. And I'd be pleased to have an ongoing conversation. I'm sure that Councillor Macri and Councillor Scanner likewise would be pleased as your ward councillors. Thank you.
Councillor Passos.
Yes, now, here in these situations you have to have the wisdom of Solomon. You do this to one street, you're sending traffic to another. Now, I can see from the photos and from how the residents spoke, it is a very, very problematic street. We have a few streets like that here in Ashfield. And one way of looking at it, I've tried to read this. I haven't followed this proposal, this issue very much, so I might need some answers. Has council looked at restricting parking on one side of the street?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Three options were looked at and presented out to the community for consultation. One of them was removing parking down one side of the street.
Well, is there any way that we can remove parking on one side for 6 months and see how it goes?
I'll put that question to the officers.
That's certainly a recommendation that can go to the traffic committee. That's the
Well,
way.
I'd like to move that way because you can't really, you have to think of the residents in both streets. There's no doubt it's a big problem. And I've always maintained traffic is one of the hardest issues on council. If we're sending traffic into another street, then you have that effect. It's not really fair. Why don't we try restricting parking on one side of Warren Road, see how it works. If it doesn't work, well, you'll have my support. It might alleviate some of the problems that are there. Let's try this first.
I'll call the meeting to order. I'm sorry, I'll call the meeting to order. I'm going to insist, absolutely insist, that we won't have councillors spoken over the top of while they're debating a matter. I understand that it's a matter of great importance to you. Nonetheless, I'm going to ask you to hear the debate in silence or to leave the chamber. Councillor Passis.
Well, that's the only suggestion I can make because this has happened over the years that I've been on council and we are moving the problem into another street. As I said, I can understand. Well, we've had speakers that are saying they're going to have to. How wide is the street that we're going to move the traffic into? Could you?
I'm sorry, the next person who interjects is going to be asked to leave the chamber.
But I asked to the officer through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, you're right telling me to read the report. I just had a quick glance at it. But what makes my mind up is when residents address council, I seem to get more out of that than I do out of the report. And I understand you both have a good reason, and I can understand that. But I've always maintained you cannot shift a problem to somewhere else. Why don't we try 6 months of only one side parking? And if it doesn't work, come back here and you'll have my support. If it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you for that.
You've put up with it this long.
I've got Councillor Iskander.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I go back 12 or 13 years ago and we're still discussing the same problem. Different options being put, but I was from the very beginning that whatever you do, you should not have two ways option on Warren Road. So I really support one-way option there. But I would like also to very carefully say it because I don't want to upset any of the residents living in Schwebel Street, in Renwick Street, in Premier Street, and in Carey Street. All these streets will be affected, and we try to have a traffic management plan to that area. Before, we had it, and we changed from time to time the way how to go from Illawarra Road into these streets. Again, I would like to see, after we will support and have the Warren Road as one way, I would like to see the strategy being done, and if we can solve the problem of the other streets, I'll be supporting that definitely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll just speak very briefly to the report, to the Traffic Committee minutes. Firstly, I'd just like to thank council officers for having developed the Go-Get car share proposals, which were tabled by myself via a mayoral minute. I do think it's an interesting pilot and experiment. I concur with Councillor Macri that we should be considering for a business as successful as Go-Get that there should be a fee, just as a local resident would pay. And so I support that amendment, but I want to thank the council officers for having developed the proposal and look forward to seeing the outcomes of the trial. Also want to thank the officers for listening to the residents in Warren Road. It was clear when the matter came to council several months ago that there was real impacts on people's quality of life. Councillor Passos is absolutely correct that there are all sorts of unintended consequences that can come about through changes to traffic conditions, and it is actually impossible to satisfy everybody. There may well be flow-on effects from this, but let's deal with the problem before us, which is we've got a serious safety problem in Warren Road, and we've now got a solution which is supported by the council officers, which we can adopt tonight. So thank you very much for your advocacy, and I hope that that makes a significant difference. Further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll go to Councillor Macri for a right of reply.
Chair, I'll just chime in on just the Warren Road issue. The parking, taking away parking on one side was canvassed as an option and wasn't supported in the street. So it's interesting that we seem to be making the news for the highest increase in parking fines in Sydney, and then we're reducing parking. We're sort of not getting a good look out there, and we're reducing the livability of our area by doing that. The one-way movement, it's really not important which way it goes, but I think the way that actually reduces the impact to all the surrounding streets should be assessed in that, and I think the residents already noted that they're happy with it to go either way. And we are not actually adopting this, I have to correct you, Mayor, we're actually doing further detailed studies because the RMS wanted some more work done, and then it's going to be reported back to the Traffic Committee for the RMS to consider. So we've got our own principal support behind it for that one-way movement. So there's still a lot of work to do, and we want to make sure it's done properly.
Okay, thank you for
That's
that.
all I'll say. Thank you.
I'll now put the, so we've got an amendment from Councillor Passos. Is there a seconder for that? If not, that will lapse. I'll now put the primary motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item. You're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting, but it'll get more boring from here. We've just concluded the Traffic Committee. We just voted on it. Item 5, 10 to 18 to 19. Oh, sorry, that's in Committee of the Whole. Item 6, Marrickville Parklands and Golf Course Plan of Management. No, it was the last item that we debated, then we went to Councillor Macri for a right of reply. What did you wish? Well, okay, that's fine, but we've adopted the resolution. What is it that you wanted to raise? Yeah, there were others discussed, and then I went to Councillor Macri for his right of reply. What did you wish to raise?
Well, I wish to raise what is on the Traffic Committee here is congestion near Asheville Station. Council officers tabled a response to resident concerns with congestion in Wood Street at the intersection with Elizabeth Street, Asheville. Council officers did not observe any congestion when investigations were undertaken during peak morning, midday and afternoon times. It was noted that Sydney water works were occurring at the time the concerns were raised, which may have contributed to congestion. No changes are recommended. However, council officers will continue to monitor the intersection. Well, let me put it this way.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to, Councillor Passos, I'm seeking to work with you here. Councillor Macri, Councillor Passos has a question through the chair that she wished to ask while the Traffic Committee report was being considered. I'll recommit, given it was adopted unanimously, and Councillor Passos clearly just missed that moment.
Officer.
No, I'll indicate that I'll recommit the vote on the Traffic Committee subsequent to this question through the chair. Councillor Macri, Councillor Passos.
Maybe Sydney Water was working down there the day the officers called down, but it's not mentioned here that Sydney Trains works there every couple of days. They take over the area, it's congested, something shocking. I've also raised the garden bed that was put on the corner, and I was told we're going to put an arrow up for the cars to come out. It does not work. Cars exiting Wood Street, turning left, drive right over the lines into oncoming traffic. And nothing is going to fix that unless that garden bed is removed.
Councillor Passos, is this an amendment or a question through the chair?
It's a question through the chair because I cannot see anything happening. I live this place. It's
I'm
so
going to ask
busy.
you to come to the question.
Well, my question is, I need the traffic committee to go back and have a look at this. It's not good enough telling me our officers went down, Sydney Water was working there.
So, Councillor Passos, it sounds like you wish to move an amendment to the...
I'd like to move an amendment.
Yep, what is that?
That area and those issues I have raised are brought back to the traffic committee. I'd like to be notified when the committee is on, and I would like to attend.
So, Councillor Passos is moving deferral of which item on the traffic committee
It's in
agenda?
general business. It's sort of giving us a report.
Well, I'm just trying to assist with the...
Last page of the traffic committee.
Right.
The deputy mayor has been down on site. A doctor has written a submission in, and he's accepting what council has told him. It does not address the problem.
But do you want to go out on site?
I think the whole traffic committee should go out on site.
The officers can go out on site.
Yes.
We can't convene the traffic committee there. Councillor Passos is moving that there be a site inspection held for item 23. Is there a seconder for that?
You're very interested in safety. You're
Seconded-
very interested in safety.
Seconded by Councillor Macri. So I'll put that amendment. All those in favour?
Oh, good. Don't be in favour of it. Good.
Councillor Kiat.
Can I ask the traffic officer to explain what this is about?
Well, go out on site and have a look.
Okay, I'll adjourn the meeting momentarily. I'll have to adjourn the meeting. Yes, no, fair enough. Councillor Kiat, what's the question you'd like to ask through the chair? No?
Come on, put it to the vote. I'd like to see the vote. Put it to the vote. No one's interested. Please put it to the vote, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Councillor Kiat, ask your question, please.
Through the chair. Can I ask the traffic officer to comment on this item, what investigations were taken and what the findings were?
I'll put that question to the officer.
It relates to some work council did recently in upgrading Wood Street heading towards the intersection of Elizabeth Street at Ashfield. The complaint we received from the doctor's place, I think it was, indicated that cars were queuing in Wood Street to get out onto Elizabeth Street and causing congestion. So we arranged to visit the site during those peak hours of operation to observe what was causing the congestion, and we could not see any congestion at any of those times. And when we spoke to the person who raised the complaint, it was indicated to us, well, on the day he observed it, that there was some Sydney waterworks happening which may have contributed to it. So we said, okay, we'll monitor the situation and see if it happens again, but we couldn't see any reason what was causing the congestion.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll put the...
Excuse me, clarification to the officer.
Yes?
Wasn't it recommended to the doctor that one parking spot was going to be removed?
I'll put that question to the officers.
On a similar issue, the concern that was raised about traffic exiting Wood Street into Elizabeth Street, veering over to the wrong side of the road, we put a recommendation through the traffic committee to install edge line marking, which would direct the traffic further over to the right-hand side of the road. We weren't going to remove the parking spot, as I recall.
Yes, well, I was told you were.
I'll call the
You're
meeting
going
to
move
order.
one on
The
right.
officer is answering the question.
Okay, well, can I was told about the traffic committee said they were going to move the parking spot on the right-hand side. That caused the congestion because cars could not line up to go left or right. And where the garden is still very problematic.
Okay, well, Councillor Passos, I
Point
think
of order.
you've spoken to the
Councillor
amendment.
Passos has spoken to the amendment.
She has. I'm going to put the Macri-Passos amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? That has been defeated.
That's good. I've got a division and I'll show the residents.
I'll now recommit the adoption of the traffic committee minutes. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a period of 5 minutes. I need a break.
Very concerned about traffic safety, this council.
all councillors to be familiar with. I'll just ask either the Chief Executive or the Group Manager to outline for councillors the problem that we've got with the delay in the government's adoption of classifications for Crown land in the Inner West local government area.
Through the chair. Council submitted its categorisations for the various Crown lands parks to the state government in November 2018. And to date, we're still waiting for confirmation from the state government that those categorisations are acceptable to the state government. It's challenging for us to proceed with adopting the plans of management without having had those categorisations approved by the state government. In theory, they could not accept the categorisations that council has suggested and could suggest a different categorisation.
Okay, thank you for that. So, councillors, in layperson's language, this is a really significant problem. The government said we need to go through and conduct a complete review of our plans of management for all lands that we manage, all Crown lands that we manage. You'll recall Cathy Edwards-Davis made clear to us that that's a huge planning task for the officers when the matter was reported to council originally. Now it turns out that the government itself has is refusing to sign off on the classification list of lands through that process, which is going to stop us essentially or potentially from adopting any amendment to a plan of management for any of our parks. So, for example, we've got a plan of management currently on public exhibition for every single one of our pocket parks, which may not be able to be adopted. It's preventing the reporting of the Marrickville golf course plan of management, and it applies to other important projects. Millions and millions of dollars of capital works are threatened with being significantly delayed. So I want to propose that council write to the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces seeking immediate approval of new classifications for all Crown lands within the Inner West local government area. And in addition to that, I will add that I will be calling Minister Stokes' office directly. I have recently met with Minister Stokes, have a great deal of respect for him. He's a very decent person. But this is just red tape and bureaucratic madness. We shouldn't be stopped from adopting plans of management and building new public facilities and improving parks because someone in his department is incapable of finalising a classification process. So I'll provide that wording to the minute taker. I presume it's uncontroversial. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Macri. And I'll make that an amendment to the motion, so we'll keep the first paragraph. That's the start of the second paragraph. Sorry, I'm just making it up on the fly. Just while we're waiting for that, councillors, I'll just conduct a bit of a straw poll. Is there anyone who has any objection to dealing with items 7, 8 and 9 in block? Is there anyone who has any objection to deal with items 7 and 9 in block? Okay, I intend to move adoption of those recommendations. Okay, or we'll just need to, have you captured? I'm not able to see it. That council write to the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces requesting that the Crown Reserve land categorisations be expedited so that council's plans of management can be approved. Excellent. Seconded by Councillor Macri. I'll put that. All those against, all those in favour, against, declare that carried unanimously. Councillor Stamoulis has moved adoption of items 7 and 9. I'll second that. All those in favour, against, declare that carried unanimously. Item 8, Budget Savings Tracking Summary. Councillor Kiat has a question through the chair.
I'd actually like to move the recommendation with an amendment.
Yes.
Simply that we receive a full report on the proposed savings identified in this report at the next meeting. I mean, it doesn't need to be at the next meeting if that's not available, but the intention is that, so thank you to the Chief Executive for preparing this report. I've spoken with the Chief Executive about the work that's gone into this. I think it's important for us councillors to be abreast of some of the very significant savings that have been identified. We've been assured that this is not cutting into our service delivery, and I guess we need to be assured of that. And as far as possible, we need to know how cutting $10 million out of our operating budget is not actually going to impact on what the community expects. I said when we passed the budget that I didn't agree with the idea of passing a $10 million savings target without having any measures by which the elected council would decide on what those savings would be. And I think that this will allow us to have some accountability and transparency over these changes.
Questions before but did not get answers, so I just wondered what the two specific cuts.
I'll recommit the motion. Withdraw the motion. Councillor Cruz.
The two specific cuts I was interested in, I did put the question to the CEO before today's meeting, were the SNAP Send Solve $20,000, what that was doing, what impact that has, or how that savings being achieved. There was a question. Sorry, that's a question. What the effect of the 20,000 saving on Snap Send Solve is? What that means?
Put that question to the officers.
Through the chair, Snaps and Solve is an app that has been around for many years that is used by a lot of councils across the state to submit customer requests. Council actually currently spends $20,000 a year on Snaps and Solve. It is basically been superseded by council's new system. So when Snaps and Solve was being used, our use of online customer requests was around 8 to 10%. And that has since moved up to 35%. So it's currently 35% of all requests for service from customers to council are now using council's online portal. The Snaps and Solve app provides a very poor level of customer service and causes a lot of mistakes to be made. The problem is that Snaps and Solve is essentially a very dumb app. It doesn't actually give proper descriptions of the request and doesn't give proper locations. So what often happens is that when requests come through, they are very hard to identify. And not only that, it doesn't require customers to identify themselves or give further information. So it's a very, very inefficient and gives very, very poor customer service. Council's online portal, on the other hand, actually has various fields which require a detailed description of what's required. It gives options for the customer to provide their details so that we can actually close a loop with them. And it actually ensures that the request is dealt with effectively and customers are communicated with. The other problem with Snaps and Solve is that it is actually. Okay. So the point is.
So I don't mean to interrupt. I was actually. I get
Call
the
the
feeling.
meeting to order. I'll just ask the council officer to conclude his answer to your question, councillor.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask the council officer to conclude his question.
So advice from the customer service, group manager customer service, is that Snaps and Solve is not actually useful to council as a customer request system, and that we should move more fully to online customer service, and that is essentially way past its usable date. Therefore, the $20,000 is a complete waste of money.
Councillor De Cruz.
So basically, the $20,000 is to cancel whatever service or connection or integration with Snaps and Solve. Is that?
It's
in
to
summary?
council our current subscription through the chair of $20,000 we pay
Okay,
Snap.
through the chair, I have a further question. Snap Send Solve is actually appears on all the notice boards throughout the Leichhardt municipality, so those notice boards will all be updated with how to contact and report issues.
That's a statement again.
I'm asking you, is that considered in cancelling Snap Send Solve?
I put that question to the officers.
Has that been budgeted for?
Yes, through the chair, all of essentially anywhere where Snap Send Solve is mentioned, we'll actually have a campaign to promote use of council's online portal in its place.
So that means that all the notice boards which currently advertise Snap Send Solve will be replaced.
I'll put that question to the officers.
All communication that mentions Snap Send Solve will be replaced with references to the use of council's online portal.
Question's been answered.
Okay, and the next question is, what is the implications of the 30,000 savings against the bush regeneration?
I'll put that question to the officers.
So through the chair, these savings, when they were established, they in consultation with all the group managers, there were several parameters. One of the key parameters was that they could be delivered within 12 months and that they would not lead to a reduction in service. Essentially, all of these savings, including the bush care savings, relate to administrative efficiencies as guaranteed by the group manager that can be delivered whilst still delivering the service.
Okay, Councillor Kiat doesn't need to speak further to the matter. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item, I believe, is item 10, car parking. We'll carry over from that, given that Councillor Passos isn't in attendance. Item 11, council submission to parliamentary inquiry into sustainability of energy supply. Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a good opportunity for Inner West Council to promote and publicise all the great things we are doing in relation to energy. I don't have a list of them here because I think everyone knows what they are. But I think it would be helpful for other councils to see what Inner West Council is doing in relation to solar energy. Our agreement with Moree Solar Farm for 25% of energy for council, increasing solar energy for council buildings so that we are less reliant on the grid, encouraging residents to take up solar energy, and doing things to and doing those kind of things to promote and support renewables in Inner West Council. In relation to points 4 and 5 of the motion, Council has a strong policy in relation to divesting investment in fossil fuels. That includes coal and coal mining. And since Marrickville Council days, Council has opposed coal seam gas mining in this area and generally, and has reiterated that in this council. And therefore, supporting a phase out of coal and coal-fired power stations is entirely consistent with council's current policies in favour of renewable energy, and that's why we have put them in there. In addition, our policy in favour of renewables will help regional communities and workers affected by changing energy and resource markets, and that includes Inner West Council as well, because it will create new jobs, new industries and new opportunities for our residents. We will also show support for regional New South Wales and network, because that way we have strength in numbers to influence policies of the New South Wales government in relation to environmental sustainability. So that is why I have put this motion. The deadline for the parliamentary inquiry is very, very soon, and that's why this motion had to be brought today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Steer, for bringing this. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to, as Councillor Steer has said, put on record this council's position on issues that are relevant to the inquiry. I would like to move what I assume is going to end up being a foreshadowed motion. I haven't had a chance to discuss it, I'm sorry, with Councillor Steer. I literally got to this afternoon. A lot of it is iterative of what Councillor Steer has already written. There are a couple of substantive differences that I'll speak to, namely point 3, which is I think if this council is to make a submission into the parliamentary inquiry, we should take the opportunity to focus not only on council's strong record in this area, which I've tried to elaborate on, but also to really pick up on some of the barriers that are in place at a state level that are getting in the way of this council and others taking strong action in this area. So, for example, I think we should advocate for the removal of those regulations that create barriers for uptake of renewables in apartments. So the strata laws that are creating those obstacles, we've had some significant experience of that already in this council. I have checked with Local Government New South Wales today, and my understanding is that actually if we are to adopt in this submission their position is actually that they are advocating for a renewable energy target of 40% by 2025. I think that needs to be accurately reflected in our submission, and I have specifically done that today, so that's updated point 4. I don't support this council advocating for or taking a position on a state-based target in relation to renewables. That's not something that this council has debated. That's not something that this council has jurisdiction over. Individual councillors, if they feel strongly about that, should make individual positions. I don't think it's appropriate that the Inner West Council, which as far as I know does not have any coal-fired power stations operating within the LGA, should be taking policy positions on that topic. So I have suggested that we remove that point, and then I've added a point to Councillor Steer's original number 6 about the Just Transition Authority and making sure, a proposal for a Just Transition Authority and making sure that any transition is adequately negotiated and takes into account the impacts on the workforce in those fossil-intensive sectors.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there a seconder for that motion? I'm certainly happy to second it. Councillor McKenna will be the seconder. You wish to speak to it, Councillor? Okay, so we've got a primary motion from Councillor Steer, seconded by Councillor Lockie. We've got a foreshadowed motion from Councillor York, seconded by Councillor McKenna. There's no further debate. I'll go to Councillor Steer for her right of reply.
Yeah, look, I'm really surprised to see that the party line on coal has come all the way down to the Inner West Council. What Councillor Steer has said we should include in our submission is support for a phase out of coal mining and coal-fired power stations in New South Wales with the transition to renewable energy sources by 2030, and that's what substantively has been removed. That's really surprising. I think that we do actually have support in the Inner West to avoid catastrophic climate change. What we need to do our fair share in Australia to avoid catastrophic climate change is to stop digging up coal, basically. And and we're not talking in the US. Yes, we need to do it across the state, and when we make a submission to the New South Wales Parliamentary Inquiry, if we want to stop climate change here in the Inner West, we actually have to stop it in the whole world. So I think that it's really important that we represent the views of our community who do want to end the use of coal here in Australia and across the world. We need to make the transition to renewable energy by 2030, 100%. And the Global South needs to do it by 2040 if we're going to survive. So I think it's really important that we do reflect the views of our community about coal. I don't think that we should be censoring ourselves on coal, even though it seems that the Federal Labor Party is doing that in a big way. I think they're taking the complete wrong lessons from the state and federal elections this year. We need a full-throated defense of our future, our renewable energy future. It doesn't include coal.
I'll speak briefly. I know that Councillor Passy has also sought
I wasn't going to.
Going to either. But with all due respect, I think I am going to have to point out the shocking moralism of Councillor Kiat, who's managed to accuse Councillor York of towing the party line and of moral failure in one 90-second speech.
You did it to me and you never said a word.
The councillor who's actually brought forward all of the environmental policy that this council has adopted in the last 2 years, that's resulted in the Solar My Schools program, that's resulted in 100% divestment from fossil fuels, that's resulted in a whole range of renewable energy projects, initiating the Moree solar farm, and I might add, you've done nothing, absolutely nothing, other than bringing a few school students in here to say that we should give the staff a day off to go to the climate strike. Yeah. So you're so committed to action on climate change that you can't even bring a motion or a policy here. And then you accuse other councillors who actually
Point of order,
do
Chair.
the work.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Chair, point of order.
Councillor Hesse, yes, I hear your point of order.
Point of order, thank you. Under the standing orders, we are not to abuse fellow councillors. I would ask you to consider your engagement with Councillor Kia. Thank you.
So not having moved a single motion or brought forward a single policy in 2 years, other than bringing in a few
Councillor Byrne, I'm asking you to rule.
And saying that we should
I'm
give the
asking
staff
you
a
to
day
rule
off,
on your
to
own
get up
position.
on your high horse and attack Councillor York.
Councillor
That is
Byrne,
pathetic.
I'm asking point
Back
of
in
order.
my day, people who were socialists
Point of
like
order.
you claim to be
Point
actually
of
brought
order.
forward policies on the government
Point
that
of
they're on.
order.
They didn't just sit there
Point
and
of
accuse
order.
other people of
Point
a
of
failure
order.
of morality.
Point of order.
Grow up, son.
Point
Learn
of
some
order.
politics.
Point of order.
Councillor passes.
I note that the mayor did not respond to my point of order
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
after 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. You don't know how much I enjoyed that. Now, may I say, the hypocrisy that's coming from these people is unreal. He's scaring the people tonight about climate change. We're all going to melt, for God's sake. I wish I melt at least 10 kilos, but it ain't happening. Secondly, the inner west is so concerned about climate change. The inner west is so scared. We're worried about this. That's why the Greens are dropping leaflets in Summer Hill, begging for new members, trying to scare the school kids that the world's going to end next week, accepting funding from overseas donors and working in the schools on school children to scare them that they're too scared to go to sleep because the world.
Point of order,
Councillor Hesse has a
Chair.
point of order.
I would, apart from the incorrectness of Councillor Passes, I'm asking for relevance.
Well, the relevance is.
I'll make the ruling. I'll ask Councillor Passes to remain relevant. Please continue.
I'm remaining relevant. Do not say that nobody cares and all the coal and all you politics, oh, you're going with the Liberals, oh, you Labor. You people are the biggest hypocrites going. At this very moment, your leaflet drop in Summer Hill begging for new members for the Greens because they're all hitting the wall. They're all going down like flies. They have nobody to support them anymore. So they're going out recruiting. That goes to show, and it's an impossible job because people's found them out. And they're the ones that are telling us.
I'm going to ask you to address the motion.
Well, the motion is climate change is not what they're making out it is. And I want to tell you something. If they're such experts on climate change, they would not be sitting on a council in the inner west in Sydney. If they were such experts.
Councillor Sear, your right of reply.
Thank you. It's a shame that Councillor York had not come to me with some of these suggestions because I might have been able to incorporate them into the motion. However, on the question of coal, I can't do that. And the reason for that is simple. Councillor York has said that we don't mine coal in the inner west, so why should we make a position on it? That we've made positions on many things that are not directly happening in the inner west. And from supporting the ICAN Treaty against nuclear weapons to writing many times to federal government ministers about issues that concern us. Councillor York may be unaware that Balmain was a hub of coal mining activity historically, and to this day, searches have to be done by lawyers doing conveyancing in that area under the Mine Subsidence Act, because a number of houses are in danger of collapsing because they may have a mine underneath them. In addition, as a founding member of Stop CSG Sydney, I was one of 3,000 people who marched down King Street, Newtown, in 2012 to oppose coal seam gas mining, which was then proposed for St Peters. We now have the WestConnex interchange there, but that was a proposal at the time. I did not see Councillor York, or in fact any of the Labor councillors opposed on the other side at that rally, and they may have been there. May have been there. I don't know, but certainly I have not seen any of them.
Point of order, you're interjecting.
Activist issues. As a result of that activism, we all learnt not only about coal seam gas mining, but how the coal industry works in this country, and that it only reinforced our opinion that renewable energy, which, as I understand, all the Labor councillors support as well as the Greens councillors, that renewable energy is the future of this country. It is the future of the inner west, and we all do support it. So I am urging Labor to, for once, to take out petty politics out of this, to support my motion, and so that we can, most importantly, get the submission written and get it lodged in time for the inquiry. Thank you. Oh, yes. Now, the whole reason I put this motion up was, as Councillor Macri said previously, the main complaints he gets from residents is trees and parking. Even though a spokesman for council said parking's not an issue. Don't know where that came from. Now, I put this motion up for the sole reason, the last complaint from a said he didn't mind the customers at a coffee shop, but he minded the staff because the staff stay there 8 hours. Well, that was bad enough. We know that residents bring up complaints and they're upset there's no parking in their street. And the follow-up to that complaint that came in, a councillor contacted the general manager and started asking a lot of questions. And one of the questions was, can we have car registration recognition? And I thought, what's going on here? Is this Sydney, Australia, a democratic country? Or are we going to stand on corners now or get some cameras that'll beep a red light when a car drives in that's not registered to an address in this area? So there was two things I had to do. I had to either go and ask for medication or put up a motion to show up what people we have on this council. Now, a fair few councillors have to take responsibility for this because they promise people something we cannot deliver.
When a resident contacts me saying they can't find a parking spot in their street, and I say, well, I'm sorry, that's what's happened to the inner west. We're shrinking our suburb. We've put cycleways. We've put gardens everywhere. You buy into the place. You didn't pay extra for a driveway. I'm sorry. There's not much we can do. I was totally opposed to the permit scheme. That was only a revenue raising exercise. So I said, what do I do here? And being a very responsible councillor, I said, before I put this motion up, I will have a look under the Act to see that I'm not doing anything wrong. And part of the councillor's handbook said, councillors must have a sense of humour. I said, oh, this motion I'm putting up fits that. So I put it up. And I cannot believe what has gone on since that was made known in the paper. Every single media outlet wanted to speak to me. Everybody wanted me. They even wanted to fly me to Melbourne. Now, I know this motion has no merit whatsoever. The only merit it has is to let councillors know and to show up that we are a suburb. Everybody's welcome. And whether you vote for this or not, it doesn't matter because I'll be voting against it.
Councillor, your time has expired.
And it's amazing how many councillors thought I was serious.
Councillor Lockie.
Look, notwithstanding the fact that Councillor Passis has conceded that she knows the motion has no merit, look, surely it has to be ruled out of order under 10.6 of the Code of Meeting Practice, in which the chairperson must rule out of order any motion or amendment to a motion that is unlawful or the implementation of which would be unlawful, because I don't believe we have the legal jurisdiction to do most, if not all, of what this proposes.
One councillor wanted to take photos of Red Joe plates.
I presume that when the council officers placed the motion on the business papers, that their position was that the motion, whilst clearly satirical, was not out of order. Councillor Passis herself has conceded that she'll be voting against it. So unless anyone wishes to amend it, I suggest that I'll ask for a seconder. Is there a seconder for the motion? There's no seconder. The motion will lapse. Councillor Passis has made her point. Next item. Marrickville Town Hall. Councillor Hesse.
Steve Price reckons I deserve the gold medal. And he says he wishes all the councillors were like me.
Councillor Hesse.
Thanks, Chair. It's been an unhappy night, but anyway, we will continue hopefully in a constructive way. I've put this motion forward in response to residents who've drawn to my attention the attached media release from the Australia Council, which points out the economic boom of tourism, particularly around the arts, and also in particular how it relates to Marrickville Road. Tomorrow night, many of us will be at Marrickville Library at the official opening, celebrating a great cultural institution, a place which I think is going to be loved by people across the inner west. And I've said it on my Facebook page, but I'll say it here today. I pay tribute to particularly former Marrickville councillors Sylvie Ellsmore from the Greens and Joe Harlan from Labor, who I think were the people who made this happen above all others. There are lots of other councillors had an constructive input too, but they, above all others, made that contribution. We have an opportunity, I think, to make Marrickville Road one of the premier, seriously premier art precincts in this city. We'll have a new library. We've got amazing live music venues up and down Marrickville Road, from Dulwich Hill right down to basically Sydenham Station. We've also got a lot of empty shops, as I don't need to tell Councillor Macri. If this is an arts precinct, an art gallery, a place which is a public building with perhaps a permanent collection as well as art for sale, exhibitions and so on, we potentially would see people coming from other parts of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia and internationally. The potential business payoffs for people in Marrickville Road and Illawarra Road will be significant. The creative payoffs for our creative community would be outstanding. I recognise that there is, as the officers have said, an expression of interest process card, but I didn't put this motion in earlier because I was waiting for us, of course, to, as we discussed at the last meeting, on our assets to get that policy passed. I'm happy to ask our officers, if councillors are okay with it, to assess any of the expressions of interest in the context of this proposal, and if there's something we can work with, that'd be good. I think I would hope that councillors engage with this seriously. It's something I brought forward because I think this is an opportunity to really establish Marrickville. Let's face it, Sydney, the city of Sydney, partly because of the lockout laws, is pretty dead culturally. We have an opportunity to grab it, and I think we should. We have our vacant town hall, which is a great building, turning it into offices for people to sit in and move pens around and what have you, and typewriters or computers, is not a great way forward. So I look forward to the discussion, and I hope it's a constructive one. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Yes. Councillor Steer, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes. I commend this motion because I do, for the reasons that Councillor Hesse has said. We have a golden opportunity here with the opening of Marrickville Library to create synergy with Marrickville Town Hall to have an absolutely first-class cultural hub right in Marrickville. We talk a lot about cultural hubs and where they should be at these meetings, and here is a golden opportunity to do this with buildings that already exist. And I understand from Councillor McKenna that some musical groups are seeking space for performances, musical societies, and they can't do so because of the costing at the moment, being on an hourly rate. I'm not going to, that's a subject of a different motion, but the point is there is demand for using these spaces for public performances and other artistic events, and also as a public meeting space. If it is used by a particular group for business purposes or administration purposes and be close to the public, that would be a great shame to remove a valuable resource from the community. Particularly as Marrickville Library is about to open, and to great fanfare, and I'm sure, having seen that space, will become a very valuable community hub. So I would commend this motion to all councillors to fulfil the goals that we say that we have and create a cultural hub right there on Marrickville Road with existing buildings.
Thank you, Councillor. I wish to move a foreshadowed motion noting the officer's advice that the expression of interest process for Marrickville Town Hall has been undertaken and the outcomes are to be reported to Council in September. I must say I'm a little disappointed to see a motion before us that would circumvent that process. Whilst I share Councillor Hesse's passion for seeing a cultural use for Marrickville Town Hall and the former library premises, I think it would be more than a little disingenuous of Council to have adopted unanimously an EOI criteria, put it out for public exhibition and for expressions, and then to circumvent that process and preclude any of the submissions that we have received, which have been assessed and which are being reported here within a matter of weeks, that might not be specifically about a gallery space and performance space. So essentially to throw them out before we've read them or seen the officer's assessment of them, I think would result in a loss of trust with Council. I certainly hope and expect that a number of those proposals, I understand there's 9 or 10, will include artistic and cultural activity. I certainly hope so, and that's my expectation. But I think it would be a really bad move for Council to conduct that sort of process and then only a matter of days before the outcomes are due to be reported to Council to say, actually, anyone who doesn't meet this, this criteria is thrown out before we've read it, and to circumvent that process. What I would encourage Councillor Hesse to do is to withdraw the motion, save up the fervour for when the outcomes of the EOI are reported to Council, and throw that into supporting something that achieves the same outcome whilst respecting the people who've made those submissions and the organisations as well. I've got Councillor Iskander and then Councillor Passis, and I'll just provide the wording of that foreshadowed motion to the minute taker.
Thank you. Look, I've read carefully and listened carefully to Councillor Hesse, and I 100% support the spirit of what he is moving. But also, I would like to repeat what you already said. We are at the end of the process and all the application being assessed. A report is coming, and it's not lawful. It's not at all lawful to bring at the last minute such a move. This is to start with. The second one, which is very important, I do understand that you are talking about multicultural hub, multicultural activities, which include, definitely include, all kind of culture which belongs to different ethnic backgrounds, Aboriginals, all the Australian fabric of society. Means everything we're saying here in this report, which I support, it is included in the one of the application or more, as the mayor said. So I would like to stay very firm by saying, let's wait till September report and see what's going to happen. And I'm sure the result would be very good for all of us.
Councillor
Thank you.
Cassis.
Yes, well, I'm voting against this motion solely because, first of all, where are the costings? I don't see any costings here, what this would cost. This is very selective when certain motions go up. Secondly, the town hall belongs to everybody. And we should be looking at the town hall, if it's not for community events, to hire it out for weddings and engagements, 21sts, and functions from different groups of people that will generate some revenue for the upkeep of the town hall. Now, I'm afraid to say I go to Marrickville frequently, and the traffic is not blocked by tourist buses from Japan. In fact, I haven't seen one tourist bus pull into Marrickville in all the years I've been going there. As for artists, I don't think artists are doing too well in the inner west, seeing that they're coming to council, cap in hand, and all we're doing is giving them money. And all we're doing is giving venues money that have artists. And the galleries around the place, I'm led to believe there's a fair few galleries that can't even pay their rent to council. And council has to threaten them with eviction. So I don't think this artist is going to work very well in Marrickville. Especially if councillors go and walk through Marrickville, they will see the beggars on the street with a tin asking for money. So please do not say, do something to address these problems, the ugly shops, the shops that need refurbishing, the shops that need painting, the urine in the plaza, the grotty plaza that needs cleaning and needs refurbishing, and the people that are costing you on the street, every second person that are either drugged out of their mind or their pants are falling down, urinating on themselves and begging for money. I can just see that the artist hub of the inner west.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor York.
Oh, I just wanted to remind councillors that at the time that council was asked to endorse the EOI, the expression of interest for Marrickville Town Hall going out to the public, representations were made by several members of the community for specific uses for the Marrickville Town Hall, and we voted against those on the basis that there should be an open expression of interest process that was open to everyone equally. So on that basis, despite the merits of the idea that Councillor Hesse's brought, which I think most of us would endorse, I don't think it would be fair to those community members who came on that evening and spoke very passionately about a specific use which is quite different from the one that the council has brought tonight, that we should then skip to the end of that process and circumvent it, given that we did specifically say we should go out to that EOI process. I just don't think it would be fair to those community members, amongst the others who have participated in that process in good faith. So for that reason, I'll be supporting the foreshadowed motion. I don't think this should be the end of the discussion, but I do think we should see that process through. We specifically, as councillors, amended the EOI to make it very clear that the EOI was open for community uses and for not-for-profit uses, so that we could get to proposals such as the one that the council has brought tonight. I certainly support consideration of those that have come through that process. I don't support skipping to the end of it in an untimely fashion.
I believe that with the opening of the brand new library and the refurbishment of the town hall, there's fantastic opportunities to transform this area of Marrickville and to use our imagination to create a fantastic community hub. So in light of that, I'm proposing the following amendment to the foreshadowed motion, and that is council will prioritise use being for community, arts and culture. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to incorporate that amendment. We voted unanimously for the terms included in the EOI, which include cultural purposes. So that's redundant. In the EOI. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'm not going to incorporate that amendment, so we can vote on that when we deal with the foreshadowed motion, if we deal with the foreshadowed motion. So I'll go to Councillor Hesse for his right of reply.
Thanks, Chair. When you get new information, it's probably a good thing. It's probably a good thing to consider new information on its merits. And I understand that there is probably, as Councillor York says, some broad sympathy for it. I also gain from the conversation that there are people who have a fairly good idea about what's in there. I don't have any official advice on that at all. But I guess there are different information flows going on. The potential for this building is, in a sense, one-off. We're not talking about excluding the public. Obviously, as part of that, I think we're all very keen for people to be able to have public meetings in the auditorium, to be able to have parties, weddings, funerals, whatever they want to have. That's a given. But to lock up this beautiful building and have people sitting at a computer console typing is not what we want. I don't think it's what the community I live in wants. I've got to say, it's a different place to the one that Councillor Passis has described. And I'm probably pleased I've never seen Marrickville Road. That's probably a good thing. But I really would ask councillors to consider the future and not a short-term process. No one has committed, we haven't committed to do anything. People have said, yep, we've got an idea. Sure, if there's a great idea, I'm happy to consider it. But if it's putting people in there, sitting in an office in front of a computer, putting the odd cultural event on, not much of an addition to our community. It certainly won't bring a lot of people to our community. And I'd ask particularly Councillor Macri, for the people he represents in particular, to think about this very, very deeply. Because a place which is just another office is not going to help Marrickville. It's not going to help Marrickville Road, and it's not going to help the businesses in Marrickville or our community. It doesn't add anything. I think having something which has got a big cultural, well, yeah, actually, in a place that we own and that we can actually dictate to a fair bit and work with people who've got some skills and some money to do it. Exactly. That's right. I think, it sounds like the majority are not going to go there. Well, so be it. But I did bring it in for good faith. I guess that's it. Okay, I was contacted by a community member a few weeks ago who, I'm not going to go into details, but has a significantly disabled young adult child, young adult offspring. They were concerned that they had to pay the Section 94 money for a secondary dwelling. Now, they weren't crying poor particularly, although I gather money was a little bit tight. What they were seeking to do was to look after their young adult son with a significant disability, a lifetime disability, in their home or in a secondary dwelling so they could afford that young adult privacy as well as support. This is undoubtedly a very rare event. Let's face it, it's going to be rare in the inner west because not many people have the opportunity or the space on their property to build a secondary dwelling. There's not many big backyards. But the few that are there, I think this is unconscious discrimination, certainly not deliberate by council staff, but it's unconscious. And I think if we move to defer, and obviously we'd have to have a further office report on how we might do this, but if we move to defer the payment until a property is sold 10, 20, 30 years down the track, potentially when the parents pass away, then I think that's where we should do it. We should be removing financial penalties for people looking after a member of their family who's got a disability on their own property. And that's the simple intent of this motion. And I ask councillors, I look forward to councillors' discussion and happy to consider any reasonable amendment. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Kiat. Do you wish to speak to it? Reserve his right to speak. Councillors, further discussion? Councillor Passos.
Mr Mayor, I don't oppose this motion, however, it would set a precedent. Can our officers find out, excuse me, are you guys listening?
Yes.
Can we find out information about the NDIS? Is there any way that we can contact the state or federal, whatever, to see if there's any funding available? And maybe we could set something up that the government gives this council money that we can put in the kitty and not use it and help people with this type of issue. What was that?
Councillor Hesse is suggesting that we receive a report back rather than deferring contributions, which would address your issue.
Well, fair enough. I believe it has merit. God forbid I agree with anything he says. However, we really can't afford all this. Let's find out if we can set up a fund with money from the state or federal government.
So, in my attempt to expedite things in my usual collaborative manner, it seems as though Councillor Hesse has amended his motion in a way that would be amenable to everybody.
Yep.
To receive a report on how we could defer contributions. There's no one who wishes to speak against that. I'll put that motion, seconded by Councillor Kiat. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Last item in relation to Chandos Street, I will not speak to at length, but I just wish to move a minor amendment to include the option for alternatively only allowing left turn out of Chandos Street onto Parramatta Road.
I'll accept that, yep.
If it's not closed off. Councillor's already familiar with this issue and I've provided background information, so I don't think you'll need me to speak to it. Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Passos. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against it? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. We'll move into confidential session. The Merrill Minute, noting the good work at the Food Recycling Forum yesterday. Anyone wish to speak against that? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously.
I'm against it too, sorry.
Councillor Macri and Councillor Passos are against the Merrill Minute. Yeah. That has been carried. I'll move that we move into confidential session.